Chapter 279, Time to try another method. The news about the battle between Yi Shiwen and Gu Yun quickly spread in Yi Yuan school, especially through the networks of those true disciples who were all in favor of Yi Shiwen and held intense hatred towards Gu Yun. Although they did not have the strength to teach Gu Yun a lesson, this job was fairly and properly done by Yi Shiwen. They were quite satisfied from the outcome, in which Gu Yun was completely thrashed by Yi Shiwen. Their individual perceptions of Yi Shiwen did not matter much, as this incident was enough to override all those pre-existing perceptions. Now, the entire community of true disciples felt grateful to Yi Shiwen for doing what he did. At this time, Yi Shiwen was one of them and Gu Yun was an outsider. And they were going to stand beside Yi Shiwen no matter what. At this time, Li Fei's ashen face was visible to them all and making them feel proud and victorious in a way. They were the prestigious true disciples of Yi Yuan school and would certainly feel proud when one of their own defeated an outsider who was trying to look down on them and their sect. Of course, Li Fei's ancestor used to be a disciple of Yi Yuan school, but that did not mean that he could look down upon Yi Yuan school, and that too in their presence. Did you see that? Gu Yun did not stand a chance against Yi Shiwen and was completely trampled underfoot. That is how you crush someone's arrogance. Yes, true disciples of TMU are nothing but mediocre pricks. I don't see a reason why they are so arrogant. I assume that Gu Yun is not really a big shot in TMU. I guess he is just a janitor disciple with a gross arrogant demeanor. But we are talking about TMU, guys. Although Gu Yun was so easily defeated by Yi Shiwen, we must not forget that Yi Shiwen is really too strong. In just 2 years after joining Yi Yuan school, he is the first disciple in the history of our sect who has progressed so insanely. He is a rare evildoer that appears once in a millennium. Indeed, I have also heard from several fellow true disciples that Gu Yun is truly fierce. If his opponent wasn't Yi Shiwen, then any other disciple wouldn't have survived this battle. Yes, Yi Ziwen's speed of growth is monstrous, to be precise. Moreover, I heard that these two men came to Yi Yuan school in order to check the qualifications of worthy disciples and recruit them into TMU. But Yi Shiwen has ended up making them angry. I wonder what will happen now. I hope this will not affect the recruitment process. Yi Yuan school disciples were discussing among themselves. Anyway, this matter about TMU didn't really concern them in this lifetime, so they could discuss freely as much as they want. However, the matter quickly changed its form and caught everyone's attention when the news went out that Yi Ziwen's name was not present in the list of disciples selected for TMU. The news spread like wildfire in Yi Yuan school and detonated bombs of dissatisfaction everywhere. It was quite obvious that the representatives of Yi Yuan school used their administrative powers to redress personal grievances, which spread discontentment among disciples. However, regarding this matter, which basically concerned only Yi Shiwen, neither the top brass of Yi Yuan school nor Li Fei made an attempt to give any response or clarification. Inside the main hall of Qianyu Peak Palace. You were too impulsive this time. Yi Feng sighed and looked at his stubborn younger brother, who was so eager to go to TMU earlier but ended up creating such a trouble. Now, he might not have a way to join TMU. That bastard went too far. What happened was necessary. The wolf cub said with indignation, and still hadn't gotten over the way he was looked down upon by the opposite party. Yi Shiwen did not say anything but also believed that what happened was necessary and just. Now, what will you do? How are you planning to join TMU? Yi Feng asked. Rest assured, I will go for the other method. I will just go for the bottom level assessment and win my way up to the top. Yi Shiwen said in a very calm and casual manner. In fact, there were 2 ways to enter TMU. One was to impress the representatives sent by TMU and enjoy the backdoor entry, but only a selected few could enjoy such privilege. Not to mention, a pre-established connection with TMU was necessary for this method. However, even these so-called selected individuals were required to go through an assessment process, though only to differentiate them in different ranks according to their potential and strength. A lot of people were usually not lucky enough to have some kind of connection with TMU, and their only option was to opt for the second way, to participate in a competitive assessment from the very bottom and win their way up to the very top. However, the difficulty was also much larger and more than 95% contestants usually faced elimination before reaching the semis. Since the first way was now closed for Yi Shiwen, his only option was to go for competitive assessment. He was aware that this kind of assessment was going to be much more intense and brutal than expected, and he might have to kill his way through countless geniuses to reach the top. Although most of his competitors were going to come from small clans or sects, this did not mean that they would go down very easily. In fact, there were several records of peerless martial geniuses arising from small sections. Yi Shiwen was not disappointed, rather he was more excited to be taking part in the competition and also looking forward to it. Getting a backdoor entry was no fun to begin with. He was actually looking forward to gaining loads of battle experience in the imminent brutal fights. If there were going to be endless obstacles in his path, he would pave his own path out of blood and perseverance by virtue of his own hands in order to reach his goal. Not to mention, he still had mysterious space as well as Yi Mo's help. There was nothing that could stop him from moving forward. After 2 weeks, the team of selected disciples finally left for TMU. In addition to Huang Luochen, Qi Fifan, and Shuiyan Luo, Hua Menghan also went to TMU unexpectedly, along with about a dozen of true disciples. In other words, the entire elite disciple force of Yi Yuan School was taken away by TMU's representatives. Fortunately, Yi Yuan School wasn't the only major sect that had to lose its elite disciples. A large number of elites from other major sects also went to TMU. Out of the 6 pro-disciples of Yi Yuan School, now, only 2 were left, namely Chu Jingkai and Yi Shiwen. However, this outcome had a good effect on Qianyu faction's growth, as everyone wanted to be a part of the remaining pro-disciples factions. Since it was quite difficult to enter Chu Jingkai's faction, Qianyu faction became the most ideal faction to join, considering Yi Ziwen's rise to fame and his newly earned title as the strongest disciple in the younger generation. Yi Ziwen's excellent performance, as a representative of Yi Yuan School while saving Yi Yuan School's prestige and dignity from arrogant representatives of TMU, also made him a youth icon and the most adored disciple in no time. However, the departure of these elites had a slight impact on Yi Yuan School's overall available combat force, particularly in this era of Bai Mojiao's rebellion. Bai Mojiao was a cunning organization and had largely taken into account TMU's recruitment process and the imminent lack of elite disciples. It was a good opportunity for staging a rebellion. A month's time quickly passed, and since Bai Mojiao seemed to know that all major forces had sent their elite disciples to TMU, the degree of their rebellion increased significantly. Yi Shiwen even had to go himself to wipe out some of the rebelling Bai Mojiao big shots. Now, there were only 2 pro-disciples left in the sect. Chu Jingkai had to go to the depths of Yi Yuan School to deal with a variety of administrative matters, so only Yi Shiwen could be dispatched in emergency situations. Whenever some Bai Mojiao-related missions were far beyond the capability of ordinary true disciples, only then Yi Shiwen was asked to move into action. There were only a handful of half-step legendary disciples in the 5 major sects, adding up to a dozen at most, but now all of a sudden, they were all gone. This put pressure on the remaining elite disciples. Since Chu Jingkai was ready to take over the title of next sect head, Yi Shiwen suddenly became a leading figure for the younger generation. During this month, Yi Shiwen exterminated over 20 Bai Mojiao strongholds and rose to fame in the entire Great Yu state. On this day, the cloudless blue sky, as if laundered excessively to the point of flawless cleanness, was spread to infinity in all directions. Yi Shiwen was traveling on a rainbow while his hands were crossed behind his back. Even if his current strength was comparable to complete Truth Realm, the extermination of Bai Mojiao strongholds was getting more and more strenuous for him, because Bai Mojiao was calling more and more of its best members to deal with a threat like Yi Shiwen. Now, even Yi Shiwen had come to realize that he could not continue to wait any longer. It was time to have a breakthrough. After exterminating more than 20 Bai Mojiao strongholds, he seized a lot of resources, including more than 50,000 Ling Dawn, which were enough to serve his accumulation requirements. The breakthrough time was approaching closer. Yi Ziwen's inner state was already at a sufficient level thanks to devouring knowledge in bulk in the library. So, as long as he could get his hands on enough energy, breakthrough shouldn't be a difficult task for him. Not to mention, he had not completely absorbed one of the 2 zombie cores in the library and was saving it for the next breakthrough. All these resources were enough to send him directly from the Truth 8th peak to complete Truth Realm in one fell swoop. Then, his combat efficiency would have a rapid and qualitative change, making it possible for him to contend with half-step legendary experts. By that time, he would surely reach the pinnacle of Truth Realm, and the next step would be reaching the half-step legendary realm. However, his accumulation was not enough to step into half-step legendary realm. In order to compete with other contenders in TMU's assessment examination, he must step into half-step legendary realm and seemed confident as well. Chapter 280, Devil Cavalry. Yi Shiwen returned to Yi Yuan School and immediately began the closed-door training. His aura rushed from Truth 8th stage to complete Truth Realm, granting tremendous changes to his battle efficiency. Yi Shiwen had commanded not allowing anyone to disturb him. In fact, even if there was some urgent task, no one was allowed to disturb him. The value of Yi Shiwen was soon going to reflect in the future, bringing in enormous benefits for Yi Yuan School in various forms. He was phenomenal in his actions of eliminating several Bai Majiao strongholds, and this was quite a big task. After all, this mission was something not even the Taihang elders could succeed in doing so easily. Another month passed quickly and Bai Majiao activities got increasingly frequent. They also began to attack major cities. 5 major forces put more intensity in their efforts to exterminate Bai Majiao forces. However, Bai Majiao suddenly quieted down while facing that. It was just like the calm before a storm. On this day, the infinitely cloudy sky, like a relentless army general, suddenly roared and Yi Yuan School's main gate was shaken up. A thrill of horror swept away several mountain peaks, and it seemed as if many sierras, located in the front region of Yi Yuan School's campus, instantly collapsed after encountering a doomsday-like scenario. The Jin barrier circle was also destroyed in a blink of an eye. The surrounding space was torn apart like a velvet carpet, and a gigantic devil claw suddenly stretched out to grab a mountain peak. Boom! The mountain peak was grasped and instantly crushed into pieces. Hundreds of disciples were also grasped along with the mountain peak and were crushed to death. Who is that? Who dares to attack our Yi Yuan School? A voice filled with fury originated from the depths of Yi Yuan School and echoed like a momentary sonic boom. Yi Yuan School, this sect of yours has been standing strong for thousands of years, but it is time to put an end to its glory. A loud voice sounded from the other side of the crack in space. A gigantic hand instantly appeared in the sky, sweeping an area stretched over the radius of 100 kilometers in one fell swoop. What a joke! The voice originating from the depths of Yi Yuan School sneered, and a rippling sword key suddenly cut through the barrier of space and collided with that big hand. Boom! That big hand was chopped down instantly into pieces and turned into an endless amount of qi, sweeping across in all directions. However, right then, a tall specter appeared from the crack. His whole body was enveloped in dreadful machi that was distorting the air. People could not see his face, but his eyes were shining brightly like 2 big red lanterns. A terrifying aura scattered in all directions with his body at the center. Sage Realm. This devil is at Sage Realm. Yi Yuan School's disciples despaired as they discovered this specter's real level. Everyone knew that the strength of Sage Realm was terrifying and basically out of their comprehension. The legendary realm was just for legendary characters, and those characters were still bound to the mortal realm in one way or the other. However, after stepping into the Sage Realm, one would actually transcend the mortal world and witness major changes in one's body and soul. This was the so-called rising above the mundane life of mortals and entering the world of sages. A horrifying scene was unfolding in front of everyone. A large rift in the space ended up becoming a portal for Devil Army and Bai Majiao disciples to rush into this world. They were riding abominable creatures called magical beasts and invading Yi Yuan School in abundance. Various beastly roared filled the sky as hundreds of thousands of devils and Bai Majiao disciples captured the skyline. This time, Bai Majiao's tyrannical forces had shown up incisively. How can they have so many soldiers? This is insane. Bai Majiao has gathered an outrageous number of devil soldiers. This doesn't tally with the information we obtained, damn it. A disciple roared to express his frustration. Although in the hearts of these disciples, Bai Majiao was considered as a formidable organization, however, it had been in a situation of extermination for quite some time. They never imagined that even after facing grand-scale extermination, Bai Majiao could gather such an insane army. There was a creepy feeling about this. A feeling of chill greeted their hearts as they continued to stare at the scene unfolding in front of their eyes. Hundreds of thousands of mighty devil cavalry soldiers were going on a conquest, heading straight in the direction of Yi Yuan School. Some timid disciples were instantly scared to death. A crowd of elders and true disciples also went up into the sky while other disciples put all their energy into dealing with the devil soldiers on the ground. Yi Yuan School's disciples and elders were going all out. They put their lives on the life. After all, Yi Yuan School was their home that they must protect at any cost. A barrage of disciples came rushing out of the depths of Yi Yuan School and jumped into the fight without any hesitation. They were not prepared for this battle while devil cavalry was rushing to the front. One tall devil was sitting atop a scary magical beast and leading the cavalry. He looked very grim and was on the verge of going berserk any time now. Bang! The two sides crashed into each other in midair, causing numerous casualties on both sides almost instantly. Puchi! Several disciples ran directly into the spears held by devil soldiers. It seemed as if string-like spears passed through several bead-like meatballs in a blink of an eye, unfolding a bloody scene in the sky and on the battlefield. This was an extremely bloody picture, but no one had the time to think about all that. There was no turning back, no one thought of retreating now, rather they raged even more and went all out. Team after team of devil soldiers were coming out from the rift in space and rushing to attack Yi Yuan School. Boom! Human disciples with swords formed teams and rushed forward to greet the incoming devil cavalry. They joined forces and summoned up a wall of sword ki and somehow became successful in repelling the devil teams. Both sides were fighting to kill and making every effort to kill each other. This was a great event and would spread to become an immortal legend. Yi Yuan School had been standing tall for thousands of years, but this was the first time someone launched a direct attack on it. This was something that had never been seen before, so the disciples were somewhat confused. However, it seemed like now their wills were firmer than ever before. This was their home, hence, escape or retreat was not an option. Ancient Jin laws were activated and disciples got to see the true power of Yi Yuan School. These laws had stayed buried for hundreds of thousands of years for a tactical deployment such as this. Several devil soldiers rushed into them and were turned to ashes. Shoot! Someone shouted from the devil side, and immediately, devil soldiers took out their bows and shot a barrage of magical arrows into the sky, obscuring the sky for an instant. Then the arrows fell down towards the human disciples. Ah! 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 The rain of magical arrows fell upon the disciples and directly harvested the souls from their bodies. Followed by painful screams, countless disciples lost their lives. Counterattack! The senior expert shouted from the depths of Yi Yuan School, and at this time, an ancient matrix formation began to launch a massive attack, absorbing all of Lingqi in the air instantly. Rumble! Rumble! Almost in a blink of an eye, an inexhaustible black dragon appeared in the clouds and glittered violently, followed by huge electric snake creeping inside the dark clouds, and then it fell down, forming a sea of lightning. Numerous devil soldiers and Bai Majiao disciples were burned alive by the power of this lightning attack. Countless devil soldiers were burned to crisp in this sea of lightning. This was a clash between two tyrannical forces and every moment claimed a lot of lives from both sides. The terrible collisions were stirring up the meat sauce and a river of blood on the battlefield. Dreadful Machi seemed monstrous and was rising up to 100 miles into the sky. Several ancient laws were being activated to tackle this problem, but their resurrection was going to take time. Meanwhile, Yi Yuan School's disciples were losing their lives left and right because their battle efficiency was nothing in comparison to that of the frightening war freaks like the devils. For a while, the human disciples were on defense and were being constantly defeated. Hundreds of thousands of devil soldiers attacked at once. Boom! But, suddenly, a divine beam rushed out from the depths of Yuan School and swept out, annihilating an entire platoon of devil cavalry in one fell swoop. A huge war fortress flew out from the depths of Yuan School. It was actually the mountain peak to a true disciple and held tremendous firepower. It was equipped with all sorts of matrix methods and immediately unleashed numerous attacks on the devil army. One after another, several war fortresses flew out and obscured the sky. The flying war fortresses began to launch a variety of magical attacks, endless beams lasing in the direction of devil army and causing explosions. The devil army faced numerous casualties after the sudden appearance of war fortresses. The flying war fortresses made an impenetrable defense line in the sky, and on the ground as well, and successfully managed to block the advancement of devil cavalry. Bang! At this time, a thundering sound resounded everywhere along with a storm originating from the crack in space. Then, a huge figure, several hundred meters tall in height, jumped out of the crack and landed in this world. War monster! War monster! The sharp-eyed disciples immediately recognized this creature. This was the infamous war monster of the devil army. Tall like a mountain, it tore its way out of the crack in space and its frightening existence finally appeared in their world. It was carrying a crooked smile on its face as it gazed at the tiny and inconsequential human experts while revealing its sharp fangs. Chapter 281 Old Sect Head. The terrifying war monster trampled forward, and with a single step, it shook the ground beneath and sliced the air around. The long stretches of mountains were crumbled with its mighty sweep. Bang! The war monster collided with the war fortress. The most dreadful war machines of both the parties crashed into each other mercilessly. Bang! The devil cavalries, which were spread around within a few miles' range, were obliterated by the sweeping sword key. At this time, a skinny and slender figure appeared from the depths of Yuan School. His whole face was wrinkled and he was somewhat limping as well. The facial features of this slender figure suggested that the man was very old. The identity of the old man was a mystery for all the disciples who were looking at him. There were whispers amidst them suggesting he might be a senior who was in a hideaway for a long time. Isn't this our old sect head that was in charge 1,000 years ago? A sharp-eyed disciple recognized all of a sudden. Hearing this moved the disciples and brought tears to their eyes. For there was no one in Yuan School who did not know and respect this powerful leader. This old person used to be the sect head of Yuan School until 2 generations ago and was very much a legendary figure among all the sect heads. However, more than 1,000 years ago when Yuan School was surrounded by an enormous crisis, at that time, an ancient treasure trove was discovered and a large number of Yuan experts entered it. But afterward, an accident occurred and they failed to come back. During this unstable time of Yuan School, the inheritance and the human resource accumulated over a span of 10,000 years was about to get cut off in a flash. But in this time of distress, the old head marched into the east and the west and defeated countless enemies. He finally stabilized Yuan School and restored its strength and vitality. He reinstated Yuan School back to the ranks of 5 major forces. However, the expeditions which lasted for several hundred years exhausted his vitality and everyone thought that he wouldn't be able to die peacefully in a sitting posture. However, since then, the old head disappeared without a trace and everyone thought that he really died in a sitting posture. Unexpectedly, the old head reappeared in the most crucial time, once again to save Yuan School. He was the respectable elder from 1,000 years ago who saved Yuan School, no wonder everyone respected him to the utmost. The old head's stature was arched and his face was densely covered with age spots. It appeared as if life was just about to leave his body and it was definite that his survival was supported by his willingness and willpower to seek a breakthrough into the sage realm. Those expeditions had exposed his body to many hidden dangers and now it felt that end of his life was approaching. The arrival of the old head sent a wave of hope amongst the people of Yuan School. Even the spectre did not dare to deride the old head and looked at him with solemn respect, as if not daring to underestimate this old man's strength. The presence of the old head had lifted the spirits of the Yuan people, however, the war had not ended yet. Several devils were still coming in and Yuan disciples were on the verge of retreat. This was a terrifying slaughtering feast. If this had been a one-on-one battle, then Yuan disciples would have been invincible, but now hundreds of thousands were at war. Amidst the flowing rivers of blood, Yuan ancestors feared the danger of eradication. Everyone had to do their utmost and fight, there was no choice. Old guy, it is evident that you are severely injured. If you want to continue to prolong your own life with that turtle breath technique of yours, you can still survive for another 100 years, still you want to die. The specter gave a cold look to the old head and said. He was also in the sage realm like the old head, but the injury the old head had survived earlier was too grave and it had limited his martial life to only vital practices. If he was to participate in a war, his death was certain. So what if you have brought hundreds of thousands of devil soldiers, you still cannot win against my Yuan school, Kiki. The old head coughed a few times and fresh blood was thrown into the air. Old head. Yuan disciples burst out in concern, worried about his condition. I have fought innumerable opponents, the only thing missing was fighting the devil cavalry, Kiki. The old man coughed again and spoke. Well, it seems your last wish is to die, I will grant it gladly. The specter replied in a cold voice. Although he was not much interested in this severely wounded old man, he had brought this many devil soldiers to destroy Yuan school and certainly wouldn't allow anyone to stand in his way. Anyone who would try to stand in his way must die. The specter swept his long spear and released a devil technique that looked just like a devilish dragon, rushing towards the old head. The skinny stature of the old head seemed like a small boat being hit by wild waves in the raging tides. He suddenly pulled out his firm sword and released a sword key horizontally towards the incoming attack. Bang! The terrifying collision collapsed a piece of space. The dark crack in space looked quite frightening. The forces on both sides suffered heavy losses after the first collision. Clang! The long sword in the old head's hand behaved just like a black dragon, it instantly roared out and clashed with the devilish dragon. The collision produced an endless wave of energy boom which filled the horizon. The collisions between the shards of sword light and spear's shadows obscured the sky. Cough! The old head coughed out blood, but his facial expression was firm and resolute. His forehead was wrapped around with the air of death and it seemed as if the next moment he would really drop dead. Even in such a dire situation he was relentless and his attacks were fierce. The Yuan disciples were sobbing as they knew that the real cost of this fight was his vitality and life force. The specter, at this moment, shoved his machi directly into the devilish dragon which then fired a magical beam towards the old head from its mouth. The old head charged forward and slashed it with his sword key. The sword key was torn into shreds by the devilish dragon. It, then, roared and rumbled into the old head's body. Bang! The old head was flown away, his skinny body went flying into the mountain peak which was then directly severed due to the impact. Old head! Yuan disciples called out in alarm and started weeping bitterly. Our top experts, Taizhong elders, where are they? Some disciples were confused because at such a critical time, they did not know where the Yuan elders were and why would they not come out to support the old head, who was struggling at the moment. Today, we will crush Yuan school and then go on to trample other major forces of Great Yu state. We will conquer this land and turn it into a devil bridgehead. The specter roared and said. Kill these devil bastards, we cannot let the devil race step into our territory. Yes, kill these devil bastards. One of the Yuan disciples roared, the danger of eradication was in front of them and no matter what usual hatred existed among them, today, they had to fight united. There were more than 100,000 disciples in Yuan school and all of them simultaneously unleashed themselves onto the devil army. Boom! Suddenly, there was a huge burst of sound followed by instant evaporation of many devil cavalries into blood fog. It was a golden figure that, like a golden ray of light, had rushed into the formations of devil soldiers. A terrifying aura swept away as the golden light condensed into a dragon, and in a flash, dozens of devil soldiers were killed with just one bang. The golden trail came together and took form of a person whose whole body dazzled like a golden war god. It's Brother Yi. Brother Yi is here. He has finally come. Yi Yuan disciples cheered and their morale rose up suddenly. Although Yi Yuan school had many powerful masters, some even more powerful than Yi Shiwen, but they were from the older generation and not the same generation as Yi Shiwen and the other pro-disciples. Now, Yi Shiwen was the only active pro-disciple left in the sect, and these disciples could relate to him in a way they couldn't with the powerhouses of the older generation. Yi Shiwen was one of the 6 pro-disciples, an iconic young expert who was also at the helm of younger generation. His appearance in the battlefield was more than enough to boost the morale of disciples. You all need not be anxious, the head and the elders will soon come over. Yi Shiwen roared and a thundering voice spread through the battlefield. Yi Yuan disciples were no longer worried. After all, these were Yi Ziwen's words and had a natural persuasive power. Yi Shiwen summoned Han Seal, which got bigger and bigger in the sky and instantly slammed down, killing hundreds of devil soldiers in a blink of an eye. Yi Shiwen appeared callous. His body was covered with golden divinity, radiating rays of golden light in the surroundings. He was just like a tyrannical god of war, ominously glaring like a predator. This time, Yi Ziwen's fighting strength had risen all the way, breaking from Truth Realm to half-step Legendary Realm. After more than a month of closed-door training, Yi Shiwen skipped Truth 9th stage and directly reached complete Truth Realm in a single breakthrough. Yi Shiwen, I did not expect to meet you here. I remember the last time you ruined our plans, but today will mark the day of your death. A familiar voice sounded from one side. Yi Shiwen shifted his gaze, only to find Lu Hongwei holding a magical sword in his hand and looking at him with a murderous look in his eyes. Chapter 282 Fight with Lu Hongwei. Yi Shiwen, this time I will kill you mercilessly and also destroy Yi Yuan school. Lu Hongwei gave a murderous look to Yi Shiwen. His left arm didn't seem like a normal arm, instead it was a devil arm which was brimming with energy. He detested Yi Shiwen. If not for Yi Shiwen, he would not be so embarrassed. And because of this, he must kill Yi Shiwen to satisfy his obsession. Yi Shiwen had ruined his plans on Qianji Island, giving prior warning to Yi Yuan school and the other major forces about Bai Mojiao's approaching raid. This was not a hidden matter and everyone knew about Yi Ziwen's role in that incident. Yi Shiwen sneered and said, "Your century-old dream of destroying Yi Yuan school shall never be fulfilled." Several 100,000 devil soldiers had come rushing today to eradicate Yi Yuan school. This time, the enemy was enormous and powerful, and it seemed like there truly was a danger of total destruction awaiting Yi Yuan school. Lu Hongwei assumed an awe-inspiring pose, displaying the true power of half-step Legendary Realm. The extent of his power was simply difficult to visualize. The entire battlefield was riddled with corpses of devils and human experts. Everywhere, the disciples of Yi Yuan school and the devils were indulged in clearing each other out. Lu Hongwei's arm, which was possessed by a devil sword, released a devilish magical beam towards Yi Shiwen. Yi Shiwen did not budge and stood still like a mountain, with an icy cold look in his eyes. His whole body was radiating golden rays of light. He appeared like a golden god that was cloaked in divine golden halo. This was the first time he was going to display his true battle strength of half-step Legendary Realm. He roared towards the sky and his whole body was engulfed by an unprecedented amount of magnificent energy. Yi Shiwen swiftly joined his hands together and shot a golden beam towards the devil arm. Bang! A terrifying shock wave swept across as a result of this collision. The demon cavalries and the Yi Yuan disciples who were present around the perimeter were directly sent off flying. Yi Shiwen, you cannot fight here, otherwise, you will accidentally injure many disciples of your own sect. Yi Mo said. At this time, a huge silhouette appeared in the sky. Qianyu Peak was actually a flying war fortress and that had come to Yi Ziwen's aid. It was larger than an average mountain and was constantly shooting energy beams at the enemy forces, wiping out countless devil cavalries with each strike. Even the war monster was too slow to dodge a powerful beam attack and was directly cut in half. The power of the flying war fortress was fully manifested at this time. Ha ha ha, the prince is here. At this time, The wolf cub laughed mockingly, then opened his mouth and fired a grand-scale attack at the devil cavalry, which resulted in a mushroom cloud. In a blink of an eye, hundreds of devils were annihilated. Yishu was standing next to the wolf cub, and he also began to use all sorts of martial techniques, wiping out several devil cavalrymen in groups. As for Yifeng and the others that did not come out, since they had not yet entered into the truth realm, they were not capable enough of protecting themselves in this battlefield, therefore they were simply operating various Shen laws and martial attacks from inside the Qianyu war fortress. Yishuan grinned, and a burst of golden light seeped out of his body and instantly swept through the formations of devil cavalrymen instantly. Aya! The entire battlefield was shaken by the pitiful screams of the devil soldiers as their souls were directly harvested by this golden light and turned them into golden blood fog. You want escape from me? Lu Hongwei stared at Yishuan with his burning red eyes, then immediately began to chase Yishuan. Yishuan directly flew inside the devil formation and unleashed his powers, killing them in hundreds at a time while trying his best to avoid accidentally hurting his fellow disciples. However, Lu Hongwei did not seem to care about the loss of his own soldiers in friendly fire. Yishuan was like an invincible entity, cutting his way through the devil cavalrymen. No one was able to stop him no matter how much tried. The divinities crawling within his body were a devil's worst nemesis. Kill him! The shouts were lingering in the battlefield, the battle continued, corpses were being sent flying around. Streams of blood were flowing across the battlefield, indicating the extent of the death toll that continued to rise with each passing moment. Bang! 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 Along with a barrage of terrifying noises of explosions, Yishuan was encircled by numerous devil experts, but in a blink of an eye, all were chopped into pieces by Yishuan. Han Seal was summoned by Yishuan in the sky. It transformed into a huge mountain and slammed down upon devil exerts. Meanwhile, Yishuan was unceasingly slaughtering the enemies that were appearing in his way. However, as a result of that, his speed finally slowed down a bit, and this made it possible for Lu Hongwei to overtake him. I would like to see where you will go now. Lu Hongwei was keeping a close eye on Yishuan and did not seem to care about the devils who had been massacred so far. His eyes were fixed on the real enemy, Yishuan. If Yishuan was not eliminated right away, then his plan would most likely fail once again, not to mention he might have to flee again in a severely injured state like the previous time. Bang! Lu Hongwei sliced the air with his devil sword, and suddenly, a horrifying light which was made up of mochi began to billow around him. It is time for you to say goodbye to this world. Lu Hongwei clenched his teeth in anger and his red eyes sparkled like a crazed beast. It seemed as if Lu Hongwei's anger could sweep away the universe any time now. Yi Zaiwen's eyes reflected no fear, instead a golden light flickered in his hands. Coiling Dragon Palm was unleashed by Yishuan, instantly releasing a coiling dragon into this world. It appeared like a living golden dragon, all set to devour the opponent ahead. Bang! A terrifying collision took place when Yi Zaiwen's coiling dragon swallowed a huge bout of mochi, but all of a sudden, the mochi suddenly burst out of its body, annihilating it in the process. Lu Hongwei was at a higher level when compared with Yishuan. After all, there was a gap of almost 100 to 200 worth of practice years between the two. Yishuan made a strategic retreat while Lu Hongwei continued to move in his direction under the urge to kill him once and for all. Yishuan, I am afraid this Lu Hongwei has attained half-step legendary realm long back. Yi Mo's voice sounded in Yishuan's mind. Yi Zaiwen's heart shook for a moment. A while ago, he had finally stepped into complete truth realm and his battle strength was equivalent to half-step legendary realm, reaching the same level as Lu Hongwei, but the so-called half-step legendary realm had many distinctions. Although the battle strength of both Yishuan and Qi Fifan were on half-step legendary level, but in reality, Yishuan was still not as strong as Qi Fifan. Besides the ordinary half-step legendary realm, there existed several branch levels such as half-step legendary first stage, half-step legendary second stage and so on, all the way up to the 9th stage. Yishuan could easily defeat an opponent who was at ordinary half-step legendary realm, but after reaching the higher levels such as half-step legendary first stage or above, the battle strength also increased exponentially with each stage. Regardless of how much an ordinary person would practice, they could only achieve the half-step legendary realm. Only a genius could break the shackles of half-step legendary realm and truly achieve the first stage or second stage and so on. One must know that if an expert was at half-step legendary first stage, then their battle strength would be equivalent to that an expert on legendary first stage. And the same analogy would apply at other half-step legendary stages as well. However, the issue was that there was a tremendous gap between any two neighboring stages in the half-step legendary realm. An expert who was at half-step legendary first stage just did not stand a chance against an opponent who was a stage above him. This strict barrier was specifically prominent in the half-step legendary realm. Not to mention, only talented experts could actually dream of reaching the higher stages within half-step legendary realm, leaving no other alternative options whatsoever for ordinary experts. In other words, a high level of talent was a must to reach the higher and mostly inaccessible stages that were hidden inside the half-step legendary realm. Ordinary experts simply had no talent or the option to step into the half-step legendary first stage and could only have a breakthrough directly into the legendary first stage, then continue forward. Of course, if an expert was able to reach half-step legendary fourth or fifth stage and decided to have a breakthrough and step into legendary realm, then they would automatically step right into the legendary fourth or fifth stage, however, with better foundation and understanding. Half-step legendary realm was a very important stage for someone who was really determined to have limitless future prospects in the world of martial arts. It was a very crucial stage to lay the foundation for an eventual breakthrough into the sage realm, which was very important for transcending the mortal world. It was said that if a person would stay for a longer time in the half-step legendary realm, they would be able to enjoy limitless future prospects. This was the reason why TMU had made a special assessment for half-step legendary category. Those who were at the higher stages of half-step legendary realm always had more chances of being selected by TMU. However, the breakthrough to each stage was very difficult, and this immense measure of difficulty was enough to limit the quantity in each assessment. Now, it was no longer a mystery why Lu Hongwei was still stuck in half-step legendary realm. After all, more than 100 years ago, he had fought with Chu Jingkai and the other protodisciple of that generation. Back then, if he had chosen to have a breakthrough into the legendary realm, then he would probably have reached legendary third or fourth stage by now. However, he chose to stay in half-step legendary realm and was now at half-step legendary first stage. In other words, this showed how much difficult it was to climb stages inside the half-step legendary realm. Yi Shiwen, today I will kill you for sure. Lu Hongwei roared. Tianyuan mirror. Yi Shiwen pulled out his wild card. He would not have cared much if he was facing an ordinary expert of half-step legendary realm, but now he needed to pay more attention because his opponent was at the first stage of half-step legendary realm. Tianyuan mirror appeared on top of Yi Zaiwen's head instantaneously. It started whirling and simultaneously began to release a dreadful coercion, as if coming straight from the command of the Devil King and powerful enough to suppress all devil soldiers right where they were. Within a mile radius, all magical beasts began to tremble with fear and kneeled down on the ground, not daring to get up. Although no one understood why this was happening, it was the kind of scary feeling which came from the bottom of their hearts, which made them scared and timid. This was a bizarre scene and shocked everyone who witnessed it on the battlefield. However, no one knew that this scene was just an aftermath of Yi Zaiwen's intended attack that was aimed directly at Lu Hongwei. What mischief are you up to now? Lu Hongwei roared. He only felt a dreadful restraint deep inside his mind. His consciousness was being blinded. He wanted Yi Shiwen dead, but now he felt like he wanted Yi Shiwen to live. As if he was being forced into thinking that Yi Shiwen must not die and he must not attack Yi Shiwen at any cost. The confused state of his mind was a serious threat to him and his plan. This was a startling yet terrifying deterrent. His strength was also gravely affected and directly dropped down from half-step legendary first stage to ordinary half-step legendary realm. This swift decrease in his power made Lu Hongwei nearly go crazy as he rushed towards Yi Zaiwen to attack him. However, after the sudden drop in Lu Hongwei's strength, Yi Shiwen was no longer hesitant to fight back with all his might. Dash. Chapter 283, provokes a legend. The old sect head was sent flying into a mountain peak and blasted it to bits. You humans are inferior creatures. It is impossible for you to stop our superior devil race. The Sage Realm Spectre said to the old sect head with a cold look in his eyes. Old head. Old head. Numerous disciples of Yi Yuan school cried out in fright. No. Our old head was also defeated. He couldn't stop that Sage Realm Spectre. What should we do now? The disciples were now desperate. Although they were not alive 1,000 years ago, they had heard from the people, who lived during that time, about the old head. Their hearts were filled with respect for him. For them he was a deity who had saved Yi Yuan school at the most crucial time, flipping the tides of misfortune. Even now at this age, he was willing to raise his sword and fight. As long as he stood there, he was like an invincible war god, instilling confidence and morale among the disciples. Old head is now old and fragile, but in the past, he bore the title of the unparalleled hero. If he wasn't old and injured to such an extent, this despicable spectre wouldn't be rampaging like this in his presence. Whispers between the Yi Yuan disciples were heard by the spectre who, then, revealed a disdainful smile on his face and said, "Human race is really the most worthless race in all of the 10,000 worlds, and we devils will make sure to eliminate your very existence. In front of our devil cavalry, you are nothing more than a herd of lambs, all prepared to be slaughtered. Damn you, how dare you say such spiteful things to my disciples? It seems you and your stinking bugs really want to venture the depths of hell. I will gladly fulfill your wish and banish you to hell along with these insects. Yes, even the so-called devil cavalry of yours cannot defeat us." The old head stood up. His stature was skinny, his back was arched, yet he grasped his sword and slashed it towards the spectre. "You still dare to raise your sword, seems like you really don't want to live." The spectre sneered, "We have 100 methods to heal you, and you can even progress your cultivation by leaps and bounds as long as you are willing to join our side and become a devil slave. I am aged, but I have not lost my self-respect, cuckoo." The old head coughed a few times, then said, "The human race has established itself in this world through countless tribulations and sufferings. There is nothing that can ever strike us down." An overwhelming amount of heroic aura overflowed out of his body and enveloped him completely. "Those who will not surrender to us shall be slaughtered," the spectre ordered callously as he stood tall and high, surrounded by his prestige as a devil. "We will see that." The old head shot a fascinating swordki attack towards the spectre. Bang! A terrifying sound resounded everywhere as if penetrating the sky. The chaotic swordki as if appeared to be cutting the world itself into two halves. The old head's attacks continued to become more and more horrifying. This rampaging sword attack was so insanely destructive that it made the spectre retreat as far as possible to evade the attack. He just did not dare to face the old head's sword attack. Although it was clear that the old head was now on the winning side of this battle, but the disciples of Yi Yuan school did not share even the tiniest bit of excitement. They all knew that the old head was burning his own life force, and irrespective of what the result would be, he would most likely. Some people were terrified of the thought that he wouldn't even survive till the end of the war. The old head did not even portray the slightest bit of hesitation and once again attacked, churning the entire sky with his martial attacks and marking the outbreak of a great battle's finale. The old head knew that he didn't have much time, and the rate at which the fight was consuming his energy was more than he could handle. In fact, even the spectre knew that the old head was approaching the complete exhaustion of his vitality. "Don't you realize that you have come to fight an obsolete war?" Old head said lightly, but his long sword did not have a moment to stop. It was unceasingly howling and releasing swordki across the skyline. "You filthy old guy, you breathe greedily on a day-to-day basis to survive. I do not need to kill you because you will die on your own soon." The spectre sneered and said. "Despicable, shameless. You are nothing in front of our old head, so shut your mouth, you filthy devil. Originally I wanted to see you die on your own, but since you say so, I will kill you with my own hands and also crush your pride in the process. That will make you realize that devil race is the true ruler of the heavens and your human race is only suited to be our slaves," the spectre said in a loud voice while his body was enveloped in a sea of mochi. His devil spear started to rumble, summoning the ideal condition of chaotic devil laws as if restarting the age of chaos in this world. The old head rushed forward with his sword, slicing the life out of all things around. He was the strongest expert of Yi Yuan school and had achieved complete mastery over his sword skills through a comprehensive study. At this time, he finally used his sword intention on the specter. Bang! 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 The sword key collided with the spur key and the resulting explosion spread across the sky. The battle between these two Sage Realm experts had finally started to get more and more intense. Today you will die. Lu Hongwei did not know how Yi Shiwen had affected his strength, but his cultivation had reduced from single layer of half-step legendary realm to ordinary half-step legendary realm. However, he still did not consider Yi Shiwen as a worthy opponent. Since you wish to die, I will certainly help you. Yi Shiwen opened his eyes slowly. There was a divine golden radiance in his eyes, making him appear like a godly entity in the battlefield. Yi Shiwen immediately used his golden claws to stop the incoming attack. Lu Hongwei's sword key attack was easily grabbed and then extinguished by Yi Ziwen's golden claws. Last time, you were lucky enough to escape from the hands of Brother Qi, but this time, you will not be able to escape from me. Yi Shiwen smiled coldly and immediately summoned the Han seal in the sky, aiming it directly at Lu Hongwei. You are courting death. Lu Hongwei yelled in anger. Last time, he had indeed suffered a severe wound at the hands of Qi Fifan, and this was simply of great shame to him. And today, Yi Shiwen reminded him of this matter just to puncture his pride and provoke him. And it seemed like Yi Shiwen actually succeeded in his plan. The devil sword held in Lu Hongwei's hand was exuding faint traces of ma qi, and suddenly, the roars of devilish dragons filled the surroundings while a sword sliced through the sky. Even the earth shook under the influence of this sword attack. Bang! The shock waves created by this sword attack were so terrifying that they instantly annihilated several devils of Xiantian level that happened to be in the attack range. Clang! The sword light shot up into the sky, formed a dense and rippling sword light, then condensed into a rain of arrows and were blasted towards Yi Shiwen. Yi Shiwen pressed the Han seal down and it instantly crushed this grand-scale sword key attack. You are bold, human. At this time, a sonic boom exploded in the sky and a big hand extended down from the sky to grab Yi Shiwen. Yi Shiwen had dared to rush in the midst of the devil cavalry, which made him stand out as a unique entity, also turning him into a direct target. The aura which was covering the big hand was terrifying, simply earth-shattering, and while it swept across, Yi Shiwen sensed the strength of legendary realm from it. It was the move of a peerless master of the legendary realm. The devil soldiers were shivering after seeing the fearful power of this attack. An ordinary master of half-step legendary realm just couldn't achieve such a level of power. Yi Shiwen was not a man who would sit still. He stuck out his palms, which immediately transformed into dragon claws, and went forward to greet the incoming big devil hand. Bang! The big hand, the dragon claws collided in midair and mutually annihilated each other, ultimately transforming into a turbulent flow of Lingqi. Legendary Devil. The disciples of Yi Yuan school cried out in horror as they never expected that a legendary level expert would suddenly attack Yi Shiwen. For these disciples, according to their understanding, an expert of the legendary realm was a great being and simply out of their comprehension. After all, even a senior disciple like Chu Jingkai had recently stepped into the legendary realm. Boom! As if a tsunami of energy greeted the scene and overwhelmed everyone. Why is a legendary devil suddenly daring to fight with me? Yi Shiwen asked in a calm voice. Everyone gawked when they heard what Yi Shiwen said. He basically provoked a legendary devil, despite being in Truth Realm himself. Was Yi Shiwen actually provoking a legendary devil for a face-to-face fight? All the disciples froze on the spot and could not believe what they just heard and saw. This was a legendary devil, a true legend. Boy, today will be marked as the day of your demise. I will kill you first, then destroy your Yi Yuan school. The legendary level devil said while giving Yi Shiwen a cold and murderous look. Get out of my way, this is my enemy, I will be the one to who would take his life. Lu Hongwei roared. Humph, you are just a waste who cannot even cope with a trivial human of truth realm. The devil basically looked down upon the human race, and being a human being who had adopted devil ways, Lu Hongwei was no exception either. Chapter 284, Lu Hongwei slaughtered. Lu Hongwei's complexion suddenly turned pale. His relationship with devils was not necessarily good. He had followed the path of devil worship, which included practicing devil arts, ultimately turning him into a half-human half-devil hybrid. People like him were known as devil men. These people were characteristically selfish, ruthless and evil, otherwise, would have never been tempted by devil powers. Those who lusted for devil powers were certainly not part of the good crop, but real devils were inherently evil and cunning. Was there really a scope for these two types of sinister factions to get along? Although they had same interests at the moment, it did not mean that they were going to be on friendly terms in the future. Do you want to fight with me? Lu Hongwei snarled. What's the point of fighting you? Killing you shall be an effortless task and doesn't interest me at all. The devil said in a disrespectful manner. Do you want to die? Lu Hongwei gritted his teeth and said. Do not fight among yourselves, come, both of you can come at me at once. Yi Shiwen mocked them, and a terrifying aura rippled out of his body and spread in all directions. He was not at all intimidated even while facing two experts who were at a much higher level than him. Suddenly, a sword in tension appeared in his hand and began to compress and dilate the surrounding space. You devils just look big and talk big, but when in an actual battle, you cower like ants in front of human powerhouses. Bullshit, you humans can just dream of defeating us devils in battle. The legendary level devil said in a proud voice. He did not want to team up with Lu Hongwei as suggested by Yi Shiwen. Prepare yourselves. Yi Shiwen roared like a wild beast, and his voice as if broke through the barrier of this world and echoed throughout the universe. The sword in tension was instantly unleashed into the sky along with the ideal condition of coiling dragon palm that summoned a humongous coiling dragon in the sky. It was so huge that it seemed like even the sky wouldn't be able to contain its existence. This was the kind of glorious existence that could make its way directly into the historical records. Everyone was shocked by the extent of power being displayed by Yi Shiwen. Everyone was looking towards the sky as their eyes were as if glued to the magnificent golden figure of Yi Shiwen, who was floating above the coiling dragon like a furious god of war. Yi Shiwen sneered and swept the rippling sword in tension across the sky. Like a beam of fragmented yet interconnected rippling energy, it went forward at an incredibly fast pace. Yi Shiwen had already reached such a high comprehension level of sword skill that he didn't actually need an actual sword to use sword attacks. The sword in tension as if disintegrated the air on the molecular level and went straight towards the legendary level devil expert. Boom! He tried to block the attack but was directly sent flying far away. Only now did he realize his mistake of underestimating Yi Shiwen, and a look of terror dominated his face. Yi Ziwen's stalwart figure was wrapped in a dense golden cloak of divine light. Yi Ziwen's enormous power and frightening attacks immediately boosted the morale of Yi Yuan disciples, but they also felt a little strange. How in the world was Yi Shiwen was able to do all this? He was just an expert of complete truth realm, but his attacks were somehow pushing back a legendary expert. This was simply unrealistic. However, the disciples didn't seem to notice one thing that was picked up well by the legendary devil's senses. He sensed a strange and horrifying aura emanating from Yi Ziwen's body. He felt like facing a mythical being from ancient times. In fact, just by standing in Yi Ziwen's presence, he felt like his mind and soul were being dominated. He also felt a rogue idea capturing his mind, as if telling him of his inferior existence in front of the mighty being that's standing before him. An ominous coercion tightly enveloped him and made his cultivation to fall all the way to half-step legendary realm. Actually, a major part of his power and energy were used up in combating this ominous coercion, otherwise, he wouldn't have been pushed back the sword attack. I guess, now I have the required qualifications to fight the two of you at the same time, correct? Yi Shiwen said in an indifferent tone, but it was filled with a kind of invincible confidence. You are courting death. The legendary level devil and Lu Hongwei ultimately decided to join forces and jointly issued an attack on Yi Shiwen, immediately tearing the space at several places. It seemed as if numerous stars were falling from the sky and were aimed at Yi Shiwen. Yi Shiwen unleashed a second sword strike, filling the entire sky with golden energy. For a moment, it seemed like the entire world was made up of gold, but the very next moment, the golden energy exploded and suppressed the very stability of this world, crushing everything in the range. Yi Shiwen was like the sword god of this world because all sword laws were under his control. Boom! The two attacks collided and resulting exploded as if resembled the explosion of a star. The fight in the sky had entered a superheated phase while the three half-step legendary experts were fiercely clashing with each other. Yi Shiwen was keeping a strategic position in the sky so that the complementary of his attacks could kill as many devil soldiers as possible. Yi Shiwen's sword intention swayed in his hands as he said in a cold voice, "Brace yourselves." The sword intention crawled out of his hands and went towards both Lu Hongwei and the legendary devil. The legendary devil also took out his spear and shot a terrible spear attack, consisting of dreadful spurky fluctuations, towards the incoming sword intention attack. The two attacks clashed in the sky and led to a massive explosion. Boom! This was an earth-shattering collision and swept off endless shock waves in all directions. The true power of the legendary devil revealed itself just now. Even though a major part of his power was being suppressed by Tianyuan Mirror's coercion, the quality of his energy was still superior to that of an expert of half-step legendary realm. But at this time, Lu Hongwei's devil sword released vibrating machi that collided with Yi Zaiwen's sword intention and blocked it in its way. Boom! The enormous destructive power contained in this blast swept all around and the three experts backed off, no one daring to go near the aftermath of this explosion. Yi Shiwen went a few steps back before stopping in midair, then immediately unleashed yet another sword intention towards the two experts. However, this time, the sword intention was massive and proceeded forward wantonly, destroying everything in its way, evaporating mountains, and wiping out forests in a blink of an eye. While at the same time, Lu Hongwei and the legendary devil collaborated and unleashed their best attacks. Bang! The pure power of this collision invoked tremors all over and bulldozed everything in the range. The machi contained in the spurky attack left a terrible wound on Yi Zaiwen's body. The blood started to ooze out of this wound and appeared just like a fountain of blood. However, the legendary devil received a much terrible wound as the sword intention directly pierced through his body, leaving a large hole in his abdomen. Lu Hongwei was also in a critical condition but not as severe as the legendary devil because a large percentage of the blast was blocked by the legendary devil, shielding Lu Hongwei in the process. Therefore, he only received flesh wounds. An ice-cold look appeared on the legendary devil's face, but immediately, machi quickly wrapped his wound and it started to heal at a fast pace. A devil's restoration ability could really leave a human expert flabbergasted. The legendary devil's eyes were bloodshot and full of killing intention. His sword-like sharp eyes were stubbornly staring at Yi Shiwen as if trying to kill him with the stare itself. His killing intention was the real deal. Lu Hongwei was experiencing an extreme shortness of breath. He had once lost to Qi Fifan but at least he was considered the leader of the younger generation in Great Yu State. However, if he lost to a 20-year-old youngster like Yi Shiwen then wouldn't it leave a stain on his reputation forever? He had been practicing devil arts consistently for decades, then how were these ordinary humans surpassing him one after another? However, he was shocked once again when he saw Yi Zaiwen's wound healing at an incredibly fast speed and completely restoring itself in a blink of an eye. When compared to Yi Zaiwen's regeneration ability, the legendary devil's restoration ability was literally garbage. The legendary devil was frustrated and just didn't want to accept what he saw just now. How could these inferior humans have such outstanding regeneration ability? Of course, he knew that Yi Shiwen must have practiced some kind of secret technique, but that didn't change the fact that he was just a human being. His frustration was understandable. After all, he had come to this world to massacre human beings by crushing them like ants. He never thought of the possibility of bumping into a monstrosity in human form. Die! Both Lu Hongwei and the legendary devil were raging to kill Yi Shiwen and once again timed their attacks to congeal a massive Machi-based attack. Now that you devils have already come into our territory, don't even think about going back alive. Yi Shiwen sneered. The whole sky was torn open by a divine golden sword intention as it instantly annihilated the enemy's joint offensive. Puchi. A terrible was torn open in the legendary devil's body, his blood spattered and the broken bone fragments were sent flying. Yi Shiwen had used his strongest sword attack, so the outcome was not surprising. Yi Zaiwen's tyrannical imposing aura swept off everywhere. Everyone gawked at this scene because they just couldn't believe that an expert of complete truth realm could actually fight with an expert of half-step legendary realm and the other of the legendary first stage. Not to mention, Yi Shiwen was single-handedly pushing them back and it seemed as if he was not even trying. How was this possible? However, the reason and explanation didn't matter now as the Yi Yuan crowd kept on cheering for Yi Shiwen, the guy who gave them immense confidence and the will to fight back. Such a fearful human, I cannot let him live. A killing intention flashed in the eyes of the legendary devil. He knew that Yi Shiwen must not be allowed to live and grow, otherwise, he would certainly become a huge threat to their cause. The three experts again clashed in the sky and started to go all out. Yi Shiwen just wouldn't fall under the wind no matter how much they tried. Clang! Yi Zaiwen's sword intention once again instantly swept across the sky and wreaked havoc everywhere. Boom! 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 Yi Zaiwen's changed his strategy and this time unleashed a smaller yet faster swordki attack towards the legendary devil. Boom! The devil used his spear to block it, but some sections of swordki were deflected towards him from the sides and hit him, making him spout a mouthful of blood due to the impact. At this time, Lu Hongwei took advantage of the opportunity and launched a long-ranged attack at Yi Shiwen in the form of dazzling shooting stars made up of swordki. The legendary devil ignored his own injuries because he didn't have enough time to stop for healing them. He must team up with Lu Hongwei and time his attacks perfectly to kill Yi Shiwen. He would worry about his pride later, but first he must eliminate at all costs. His battle strategy was dependent on the assumption that Lu Hongwei would have to play the role of bait. However, how could Yi Shiwen not know about their strategy? Yi Shiwen guessed what they were planning to do and sneered. Right now, his physical condition was at its peak thanks to Phoenix regeneration, whereas the other two were injured and almost exhausted. Yi Shiwen unleashed his sword intention attack to tackle the incoming shooting stars. However, before the enemy could attack again, Yi Shiwen immediately summoned Han's Han Seal in the sky. It transformed into a humongous Sierra and smashed down. Bang! Lu Hongwei collided with Han's Han Sierra and was sent flying far away, ejecting blood from his mouth, then fell to the ground. He glared at the legendary devil who actually used him as a shield to escape from Han's Han attack. The legendary devil looked coldly at Lu Hongwei. Deep in his heart, he simply looked down on humans and did not think that doing something like this was wrong. To him, human beings were born to serve devil race as slaves. But before he could have fun seeing Lu Hongwei in such a sorry state, Yi Shiwen shot his sword intention attack directly towards him. According to Yi Zaiwen's battle strategy, the legendary devil was more dangerous than Lu Hongwei and must be eliminated first. Yi Shiwen Han's sword meaning light burst ek terror thrusts. The legendary devil never expected to be attacked like this and his carelessness caused his demise. The sword intention punctured the energy barrier protecting his body, then further pierced into his body and destroyed his heart, ripping a hole in his chest. On his chest ripped a big hole. The legendary devil wanted to struggle, but suddenly, a Han's Han seal appeared in the sky and instantly smashed him into ground, turning his body into meat patty. Lu Hongwei saw the pitiful demise of the legendary devil and started to laugh like a madman. Yi Shiwen was not planning to let him off and immediately released a sword-light attack that went across the sky and chopped Lu Hongwei into pieces, ending his life. Although it seemed like a long story, in fact, all this happened in a matter of several breaths. The spectacular battle between the old head and the specter was soon going to enter the final phase. Chapter 285, Died and War. The old head and the spectre were fighting furiously to decide the outcome of the battle. The old head was exceptional, he used simple sword techniques but they were filled with immense power. The strike of the sword filled the air with sword ki which cracked open a massive void. The spectre roared and a powerful dragon shot out from his devil spear. It engaged with the old head and started fighting with him viciously. The fight between these two experts was so violent that everyone feared it would cause colossal damage to the sect. Even though the eyesight of the old head was weak, he had a strong tactical understanding about how to fight high up in the sky. At that instant, Yishuan caught a glimpse of the fight and saw that the old head was struggling and had already spent most of his life force. He was losing his vision and also experiencing shortness of breath. It seemed that he would be defeated senseless any moment now. Yishuan was worried because the spectre was getting stronger. If the old head was defeated, then everyone underneath would have to face the wrath of the spectre and he would wipe out Yuan school in no time. A master in the sage realm was considered to be exceptionally strong. A legendary realm expert was enough to wreak havoc in the 10 countries of the southeast region, but a sage expert was strong enough to rule over the entire southeast region. Just one sage realm expert was sufficient to not just lead an entire sect, but also to dominate over the 10 countries of the southeast region, let alone a sect like Yuan school. However, Yishuan did not know about any other sage-level existence in the Yuan school. There was only one sage expert, the old head, and everyone was convinced of his demise. However, the presence of the old head was radiant and scared the spectre. He was pushing the battle to the limit to quickly burn up the life force of the old head. But it was remarkable how the old head had lived for 1,000 years. The old head was Yuan school's final trump card, and he was certainly not just an ordinary deterrent. Bang! Yishuan summoned the Han seal, which got bigger and bigger in the sky and slammed it down instantly on the devil cavalries, causing severe casualties. Devil experts were ignoring Yishuan. They did not want to engage in a fight with him. They had witnessed how he had slaughtered Lu Hongwei and the legendary realm devil. They thought that they didn't have enough strength to go against Yishuan. They were not aware of the role of Tianyuan mirror in the demise of Lu Hongwei and the legendary devil. They were inherently scared of Yishuan, mostly due to the influence of Tianyuan mirror which was associated with his aura, and therefore did not dare to approach him. Right now, Yi Zaiwen's focus was concentrated on the battle between the two sage realm experts. Today you will die, old man. The spectre laughed wildly and 10,000 poisonous snakes exploded out from his spear. Each snake was covered in venom which corroded the atmosphere. A peculiar feeling of terror spread among the spectators. Old Head's expression did not change. He coughed out blood once, then charged towards the spectre. His sword movements were quick and flared up the whole sky. Old Head's sword was swift enough to break through the 10,000 sword laws of the world. Boom! The old head's sword attack seemed mediocre, but suddenly it burst out into a vibrant light which was difficult to look at. It was massive enough to sweep off everything around. It instantly chopped off the spectre's spear attack. The spectre's expression changed, he was shocked, taken aback after witnessing the old head's sudden sword attack. Shwa! Old head's sword attack was bursting with terror and instantly collided with the spectre's spear attack. The sword attack was much more powerful and swift and ultimately deflected the spear attack. However, the swift sword attack didn't stop there and moved forward. The very next instant, it sliced right through the spectre's neck. How is this possible? A look of disbelief appeared in the spectre's eyes. Boom! The spectre's tall body collapsed. The old head descended from the sky carrying the spectre's head in one hand. But Yishuan noticed that his face had started to wither and his skin became dry like an old bark. He was losing his vitality and even his hands and feet were trembling. The disciples of the Yuan school were crying because they could see that the old head had arrived at the end of his life. Comprehensive counterattack. The elders, the top leaders and the present sect head of Yuan school, Wu Patian, immediately came out from the depths of Yuan school and roared. Wu Patian was covered in blood, while the other experts had also suffered grave injuries. One of them was missing an arm and was also losing a lot of blood. All these experts had experienced tough battles, and now that the enemy sage expert had been beheaded, they finally made an appearance to make use of the sudden boost in morale to lead the disciples into a final comprehensive counterattack. The death of the spectre created uproar amongst the devil soldiers. They never thought that the old head would be powerful enough to defeat the spectre. There was a sudden decline in their will to fight any longer and began to flee through the crack in the space. Yuan disciples were exhilarated and there occurred a sudden boost in their morale. Teacher. Wu Padian saw the old head, fell to his knees and burst into tears. He reminisced about his childhood times with the old head when he used to be just a student. It was because of the old head that his progress had increased by leaps and bounds, ultimately helping him become the sect head of Yuan school. He couldn't suppress his emotions after seeing this plight of the old head. Everyone was in tears. After all, the old head had been looking after them for such a long time. Many of the top leaders were aware of the majestic powers of the old head, but the disciples were never his students and only knew about his tyrannical existence. In their hearts, the old head held a higher prestige than the founder of Yuan school. Stupid son. The old head landed on top of a mountain peak and put down the specter's head. Some people came forward to receive the specter's head because it was a priceless treasure and could help in excelling a fearful magical weapon. The old head sighed, saying, "Life is supposed to start with birth and end with death. What is important is to live the way you want and to do what you want. However, we martial artists strive to achieve a prestigious title. Look at me, I should have died sooner, but I lived for more than 1,000 years, even though I have acquired this much, it is still nothing. Old head, you cannot die. You cannot leave Yuan school." Wu Padian burst into tears. It was very unlikely of a man to cry like this, but given the situation it was acceptable and no one would judge him for that. Many of the disciples were also crying. Old head shook his head and said, "Yuan school's strength has made me very proud. I am convinced that it has a strong generation of disciples." Old head's aura became increasingly weak. He recalled the time when he was just an ordinary true disciple, but once upon a time, Yuan school was in an emergency when a large of experts died in a treasure hunt. He pushed himself to the limit and came to the front of the stage to lead the weakened sect, all the way to its current glory. His peaceful life was disrupted by that. In that era of turmoil, expeditions, deadly battles, wars, he participated in all to restore the status of Yuan school and led it back on the right path. However, he lost too much and too many in the process. Loved ones, fellow brothers, teachers, spouse, he outlived all of them and lived his way to the current date. This was silent departure, his frail body instantly turned into mist and dust and vanished. In front of everyone, the old head died respectfully in a sitting posture. Everyone stopped crying, but they were full of remorse after seeing the old head's demise. At that instant, Wu Padian stood up and roared angrily, "Kill all these devil bastards, make them pay the price." Yishuan also controlled his emotions and restrained his heavy heart. After all, the old head had died peacefully in a sitting posture, and that too out of his own will. He had never met the old head, however he did harbor immense amount of respect for him. Yishuan, the wolf cub, and Yishu flew back to the Qianyu Peak, where the usual peaceful paradise-like atmosphere was now replaced with a miserable one. All sorts of attack-based laws and Jin circles were activated and working non-stop. Yishuan felt like he had entered a war machine. Yishuan immediately assumed command, while it was needless to say that the true power of Qianyu Peak was unleashed instantly. Like a domineering flying war machine, it flew forward while eradicating the devil soldiers in its way. A legendary level devil tried to stop the war fortress but was directly crushed to death by the combined attacks of Yishuan and Qianyu Peak. Kill them all, destroy the devil lair. Yishuan sat well above the seat of honor and shouted like a true commander. Chapter 286, Aftermath. The devil forces were trying to escape from the cracks in space. All the legendary experts were rushing to slaughter them, especially Wu Padian and his subordinates. He had just experienced the pain of the loss of his mentor and was not able to resist the grief. He wanted to vent out all his anger, so he rushed to kill the devil forces. Wu Patian looked like a deity who had descended into this world with a terrifying aura. The devil forces did not have anyone who could stop him except the specter, but he was already dead. Wu Patian was beaming with anger because the devil forces had dared to attack his home and the loss he had to suffer was grave. Yi Shiwen crashed into the space crash along with Qianyu Peak. He was leading the way while others were following him. Qianyu Peak was a specially designed floating war fortress that was only given to the pro-disciples and was much superior to ordinary floating peaks. Not even the attacks of a legendary realm expert could bring it down, not to mention it was not possible to bring down Qianyu Peak so easily because Yi Zaiwen was there to guard it. The combined power of Yi Shiwen and Qianyu Peak was enormous and disastrous for anyone or anything that stood in their way. The importance of Qianyu Peak could be determined from the fact that in over 1,000 years of history, Yi Yuan School was able to accumulate not more than 10 floating war fortresses. And only the pro-disciples were eligible to have their own floating war fortresses. Anyway, there were never too many pro-disciples to surpass the number of available fortresses. One must know that building such a fortress was much more difficult compared to training disciples of similar strength since the cost of the resources required was almost 10 times more. These war fortresses were very significant during such attacks and were made to defend the sect only during such critical times. During the attack, the Taichung elders were busy activating these war fortresses, and right now, they were relying on the extreme destructive power of the war fortresses to wipe out the devil forces. Yi Shiwen issued an order and the Qianyu Peak rushed forward to exterminate the remaining devil soldiers. Yi Shiwen chased the devils into the space crack and saw that at the other end of the crack, there was a valley. It was spread in several thousand square kilometers. Although Yi Shiwen was not sure where this place was located in his world, he was certain that they had found the devil's lair. Many devil soldiers were boiling with excitement after seeing the invaders in their lair. Several devil experts ascended to attack them along with many war monsters. The Qianyu Peak was surrounded by a Lingqi barrier which was protecting it, even though the firepower was consuming way too much energy from the spiritual arteries. The devil base was also surviving on similar veins, which were present underneath the valley, and it made the devil war machines much powerful and easy to use, but they still could not rival the resources of Yi Yuan School. Bang! The devil forces attacked the Qianyu Peak and it vibrated due to the impact caused by a barrage of attacks. Yi Shiwen issued an order, forward, and the Qianyu Peak crashed into the valley. Various attack-based laws and Jin circles were activated, all sorts of martial attacks were launched. Everything that came in its way was destroyed while the other floating peaks also arrived in abundance and started following the lead of Qianyu Peak. Wu Patian and several other elders, followed by the war fortresses, rushed forward to attack the devil camps. Numerous devil soldiers could not resist the attack and were killed instantly. Who is there? There was a mighty roar from the depths of the valley and a terrifying claw appeared from the sky. It grabbed one of the floating peaks and crushed it. The floating peak exploded and many disciples were killed at once. Humph! Wu Patian growled and swayed his sword. It was clear that his sword technique was somewhat similar to the old head, even though it was not that swift and potent. However, his swordki attack seemed powerful enough to split the world. Wu Patian swayed his sword, and in a flash, dissected the devil claw in the sky. The swordki was so massive that it created a deep ditch in the valley, killing unknown numbers of devil soldiers in one fell swoop. Ah! A sharp scream resounded in the sky and a figure fell from the void. Shwa! Wu Patian made a final sword strike and created a void with his might. A massive blood fog surrounded the falling figure. He was merciless with the sword because in his heart he was angry and this was the only way to vent it. The disciples were excited after witnessing this and went all out. They rushed to exterminate the Bai Majiao followers. The Bai Majiao followers were shocked and did not have the strength to retaliate. All of them were massacred by the angry disciples of Yi Yuan School under the leadership of Wu Patian. After almost half a day, the one-sided massacre finally ended. The Bai Majiao followers had nowhere to hide. Their Sage Realm devil expert, who was supposed to guide them, was also dead. In the end, Yi Yuan School completely eradicated the devil's lair. Yi Yuan School's expedition shocked the entire Great Yu state. Although it had to suffer heavy losses, everyone got to know that both sides lost their Sage Realm experts and made them feel somewhat relieved. After all, the very existence of a Sage Realm expert had a strategic suppression effect on the entire Great Yu state. However, this was certainly not good news for Yi Yuan School. By this expedition conducted by Yi Yuan School, the Bimojio organization suffered a head-on blow and was exterminated to such an extent that it would never be able to recover from this. The losses suffered by Yi Yuan School were less compared to the devil forces. 1/3 of the disciples of Yi Yuan School were killed and hundreds were injured. Although there were several hundred true disciples in the sect, almost 100 were killed and were severely injured in the battle. Over 1/3 of the elders also lost their lives while protecting the disciples in the battle. Although it did seem like the elders appeared during the end of the fight, it was not true. They were, in fact, fighting the devil forces that had infiltrated the inner parts of the sect. This time, Yi Yuan School suffered heavy losses by losing 1/3 of their nurtured and cultured disciples. However, it couldn't be considered as a miserable loss because this was the last time anyone would dare to attack Yi Yuan School. After all, if they could survive an attack of such huge scale, then could literally survive anything. Yi Yuan School was attacked brutally, but it survived and was not destroyed. Yi Yuan School had been standing tall for thousands of years, and with their hidden techniques and secret strength, who could dare to drown them? This victory of Yi Yuan School would be recorded in the history of Great Yu State. No one thought that Yi Yuan School would fall down so easily, but no one thought that they would come out of it so victoriously either. Yi Yuan School organized a huge memorial service for the fallen and invited many influential figures. A memorial service was conducted specially for the old head. The old head lived for 1,000 years before dying in the most respectable and honorable manner. All the disciples and the influential figures that had come to pay homage were younger and did not know him personally, but they held high regard for the old head. The old head had fought bravely and saved Yi Yuan School from a Sage Realm devil, ultimately ending his life in a sitting posture. If the old head had not stopped the specter, then he would have wiped off Yi Yuan School and conquered the entire Great Yu State. On top of a mountain peak that was located in Yi Yuan School's territory, two figures were standing tall and comfortably in the spring breeze. Yi Shiwen was looking over the school from the mountain peak. The reconstruction work of Yi Yuan School was in full swing. "Are you planning to go to TMU?" Yi Shiwen asked the young guy who was standing next to him. He was the strongest disciple in the younger generation of Yunqing sect named Jian Wuchen. He had come to pay homage to the old head as a representative from Yuncheng. Yi Shiwen looked at him in a somewhat strange manner. One must know that Jian Wuchen was also in complete truth realm like Yi Shiwen. He was also not far from breaking into the half-step legendary realm. Going to TMU and having such a cultivation level was not really an issue. Although it was indeed said that true disciples could at most become janitor disciples after joining TMU, exceptionally talented and young disciples like Jian Wuchen were bound to become outer disciples at the least. Jian Wuchen earlier belonged to a sword slave clan, but his status had now risen. Yi Shiwen knew about the existence of the so-called sword slaves of Yunqing sect and how the young and talented disciples were forcefully made to acquire the status of sword slave and were trained intensely to serve the imperial clan. However, making good use of such an opportunity, even as a sword slave and after being trained in the most low-level martial arts, Jian Wuchen still rushed all the way to the top of Yunqing's younger generation and became a legend over there. It could be said that the 8th prince and several other people were in awe after seeing Jian Wuchen's potential. After all, he was the only noteworthy sword genius in the younger generation of Yunqing. Others were just unable to challenge his status. His future prospects were also boundless. Yi Shiwen believed that Jian Wuchen would manage to do well in TMU as well. Of course, there used to a connection between him and the 8th prince that had forced him to become Yi Ziwen's enemy back then, but Yi Shiwen did not hold it against him. Mu Ling had also evaluated him before, saying that Jian Wuchen's sword skills were purer compared to his own. Mu Ling was quite impressed, and that was the reason why he had spared Jian Wuchen's life on the Demon Island. Such a person should definitely be a part of the first batch of TMU. Jian Wuchen replied with an indifferent expression on his face, "Those youngsters died because of me. I led them to their deaths." Yi Shiwen immediately understood what Jian Wuchen was referring to. The casualties that occurred on the Demon Island had deeply affected him and he felt responsible for the deaths of his juniors. But now all that is over, it does not matter anymore, it has opened up a path for me and my way is now the way of the sword. Yi Shiwen kind of understood that Jian Wuchen was also probably going to participate in the assessment. "That's right, I am going to participate in TMU's assessment, let's go together." Dash. Chapter 287, sets out on a journey. Yi Shiwen was looking at the construction work going on in Yuan School, then shortly decided to embark on a journey to TMU. In about a year, the TMU's assessment was about to take place in True Martial City. TMU was located in True Martial City, which was the first human city to be recorded in the history of Zhenwujie. It was one of the grand divine cities of Zhenwujie and didn't belong to any influence. It was governed solely by TMU. Within 10 days, they reached Shunan Prefecture, which was located on the bordering region between the Ming Empire and the Southeast region. The Ming Empire shared its border with the Southeast region, which was the longest border that crossed all 10 countries of the Southeast region. The Great Yu State was one of them. Ming Empire was spread massively, covering a vast expanse of land. It was larger than the combined 10 countries of the Southeast region, and this was just one of the several empires located in the southern region. Two figures entered the city slowly. Although they were not dressed in traditional clothing of Ming Empire, no one bothered to care because Shunan Prefecture was located in the border area of Ming Empire and was always visited by outsiders. One of the two men was dressed in black and carrying a blade, the other one was carrying a long sword, and there was an icy cold look in his eyes. These two figures belonged to Yi Shiwen and Jian Wuchen. Yi Shiwen was being followed by a dashing demon beast that had a shining black body. It was none other than the wolf cub, who seemed to have grown up to 1 meter height in the last few months, reaching up till Yi Ziwen's waist. "Gee, there are so many people here. Out of all the races living in the 10,000 worlds, the human race has the highest breeding capacity. They breed like rabbits." The wolf cub could not help but express his admiration. Before he could finish, Yi Shiwen slapped him lightly and said, "Stop acting like a country bumpkin, you will make us lose our faces in a foreign land." The population was so much more in Zhenwujie compared to his past life on the earth. In fact, China was only half the size of the Great Yu State and Eurasia was only half the size of Ming Empire, not to mention it was still not the largest empire in this world. The people on the streets were shocked when they saw the wolf cub, not because they had never seen a demon beast walking peacefully in the city, but because they saw a small wolf having a conversation like human beings. It was a well-known fact that it was extremely difficult for the demon beasts to acquire wisdom, let alone acquiring enough wisdom to talk like humans. Yi Shiwen and Jian Wuchen were looking for a hotel to rest for some time. They still had plenty of time and were not worried. Not far from them, there were several people talking among themselves. TMU opens its doors once in 100 years to recruit experts, and that time has finally arrived. Yes, hey, since our Shunan Prefecture is situated at the border of the Southeast region, every time a large number of experts from the Southeast region pass through here to participate in TMU recruitment. They are the weak ones, the ones who got left out. There are the ones who get directly recruited by the representatives, and the leftovers go to TMU for assessment. They are nothing compared to our experts in the Ming Empire. Only one of our experts is enough to wreak havoc in the Southeast region. Yi Shiwen and Jian Wuchen were not pleased when they heard this, because they both belonged to the Southeast region. Although the Southeast region was divided into 10 countries, the insult was directed at both of them. Southeast region is a small influence and sends worthless participants in the assessment, especially the experts of their younger generation are mediocre and get wrecked by our experts every time. Yes, the contest between the young experts is very intense, but it is also worth seeing. If it was me and had the opportunity to be at TMU, I would have never missed it. The experts who go to TMU get to assess their own strength, and also get a chance to kick some serious asses. TMU is the topmost university in the southern region. The recruitment process is very grueling, and they depend purely on talent and strength. There is no age limit to participate, even if a participant is 100-year-old or 200-year-old. The accumulation of these older experts is profound compared to a 50-year-old participant. Although the accumulation of some comparatively younger experts, let's say under the age of 50 years, who have already stepped into half-step legendary or legendary realm is not profound, they are still better than a 100-year-old expert of the same level. But even this much is not enough to win a seat in TMU. Those experts who are ambitious and want to reach the peak of martial arts, they not only have to beat their peers but also have to trample the older experts. But the experts who are more than 100 years old are generally in the third or fourth stage of half-step legendary realm. They are very powerful and experienced, and hence there would be few 50 years old or lesser experts who would be at the same level. And even then, they would need to have multiple breakthroughs first in order to defeat the older experts. Under normal circumstances, having multiple breakthroughs in such less time is impossible. Not to mention, there already are countless powerhouses in TMU, increasing the competition many folds afterward. When Yi Shiwen and Jian Wuchen heard this, their expressions suddenly changed. Yi Shiwen had not expected the assessment to be so tough. Originally he knew that the road would be difficult to tread, but he had underestimated it. He thought that the representatives would have already picked the worthy ones, like Qi Fifan, and the remaining experts coming to the assessment would not be that skillful, but he was wrong. Yi Shiwen was not much interested in TMU, all he cared about increasing his strength and stepping into the legendary realm by passing various trials. At such a young age, if Yi Shiwen was able to step into the legendary realm, then no matter where he was, this would certify him as a genius and living legend. However, he never considered fighting against much older experts who might be on the fourth or fifth stage of half-step legendary realm. But now he did not have time to think about those who were far above him. This trip to TMU was not going to be easy as he had expected, but he would certainly get to fight with talented young experts around his own age. He might get to experience startling heavenly collisions in the near future. But there was a possibility that things could take a cruel turn. These ambitious young masters would do anything to beat all the peers and establish their prestige in the foreign land. Yi Shiwen was a little alarmed but mostly calm after he put together all the facts. However, Jian Wuchen was very much excited. He wanted to defeat more and more powerful opponents so that he could prove himself as a true sword master. Hey, this time our Shunan Prefecture's ominous wolf duo are also embarking on a journey to TMU. I must warn our fellow brothers from the southeast region that they shouldn't provoke the bloodthirsty ominous wolf duo, otherwise, they will witness massacre. Ha 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 ha. Anyway, only a few people have come from the southeast region and should consider themselves as terminated already. Ominous wolf? Look, they are from your clan. Yi Shiwen said to the wolf cub jokingly. Humph. They are definitely from some bullshit clan. The wolf cub replied. They are really arrogant. Jian Wuchen said while his face revealed a slight trace of anger. Being a sword master, there were very few things that affected his composure, and being looked down upon was one of them. Just ignore them, we don't have to lower ourselves to their level. Yi Shiwen replied calmly. Although these people were not weak, almost all of them were at the fifth or sixth stage of truth realm, but they were nothing in front of Yi Shiwen. He could crush them all in one fell swoop. Indeed, indeed. The wolf cub yawned and said, they are nothing more than dried bones in burial mound. Anyways, why hasn't the food been served yet? The wolf cub instantly went back to showing his real freeloading colors. You all are way too arrogant. Don't you dare cross the line, okay? A person from the back stood up and spoke. Looking at his appearance, it was easy to make out that he was from the southeast region. Your Ming Empire is indeed very powerful, but do you really think that the 10 countries of the southeast region are run by weak lambs? Don't you forget that this is just a prefecture, not a land of geniuses. Your plan of defeating us is nothing more than wishful thinking, understood? Dash. Chapter 288, Long time no see, Lu Yueru. Well, thank you very much. No really, this is actually the first time I heard about your southeast region and its so-called glory. At this time, a young guy stepped out from the group of several young men. He stuck out his palm and instantly shoved it against the chest of the other guy from southeast region. The guy from southeast region did not even get a chance to react, he just did not stand a chance in front of his opponent who was at truth 8th stage. Bang! The young guy was sent flying across the inn. This palm move was meant to be an instant killer attack and directly punctured his core arteries, killing him right on the spot. Humph, he was a short-sighted person and so full of himself, but look happened to him in the end. I guess he thought he was still in his so-called southeast region. The young man said disdainfully. Chiyo Shinji, you have really grown stronger. Gee, why don't you teach these southeastern experts a lesson today? We don't want them wandering around in our territory while bragging about themselves. A young expert said in an instigating manner. You are going too far. A loud shout sounded from the corner of the room. Yi Shiwen turned back and saw a group of 6 southeastern experts. He actually recognized the 2 seemingly leaders of this group, namely Lu Yueru and Xiao Zhen. It seemed like Lu Yueru had chosen to walk down this thorny path. In fact, there was no one who wouldn't want to walk down this thorny road of blood and battle to gain reputation by defeating powerful peers and competing with continent's topmost geniuses. Only the most competent ones got a chance to enter TMU. Xiao Zhen stood up as he was unable to bear the provocation intended by the young experts of Shunan Prefecture. Xiao Tru, don't be impulsive. Lu Yueru frowned and said. I cannot stand these arrogant people. How dare they look down on the 10 countries of the southeast region? Xiao Zhen said furiously as he was genuinely provoked and wasn't able to bear such an insult. If I don't kill that guy, the hate in my heart will not disappear. Xiao Zhen said. Chiyo Shinji sneered while staring at Xiao Zhen, then said, You want to kill me? Utter nonsense. Since you look down upon us, fight me, and I will prove you wrong. Xiao Zhen said in a cold voice and waved his sword. After the Demon Island incident, Xiao Zhen's strength had no small improvement. He was at the 8th stage of Truth Realm right now, which was great considering his young age. I'll kill you. Chiyo Shinji took just a step and his figure suddenly disappeared from the spot where he was standing, leaving only an afterimage behind. And the very next instant, a dazzling blade light appeared out of nowhere and rushed towards Xiao Zhen. Humph! Xiao Zhen attacked decisively and shot rays of sword light towards the incoming blade light attack. The collision that occurred was destructive and had a severe impact on the inn. The 2 could not completely go out inside the inn, so they flew outside. They went high in the sky and collided severely. At the same time, Lu Yueru and her group and several other experts followed after them. Even Yi Shiwen and Jian Wuchen went outside to watch the battle. The collisions between Bladiki and Swordki were causing explosions and terrifying flashes of light, which soon attracted the attention of many people. The long blade in Chiyo Zinzi's hands released a monstrous and fierce wolf that jumped forward at a lightning speed. Xiao Zhen hastily protected himself with a barrier of sword light. His whole body was covered in cold sweat because he felt exhausted in merely blocking one attack. Chiyo Shinji was not even a top expert of Ming Empire, but it had still been so difficult to deal with him. A serious expression appeared on Xiao Zhen's face because if he failed to beat the man in front of him, then there was no way he was going to last in TMU's assessment. Who are these 2? One seems to have arrived from the southeast region. This is not the first time something like this is happening. Every time TMU opens its doors, battles like this take place all the time, basically to prove who's better. The other guy is Chiyo Shinji, a rare genius of our Shunan Prefecture. Moreover, he is the younger brother of Chiyo Langang, one of the 2 members of Ominous Wolf Duo. The spectators were talking among themselves and seemed very experienced. They had seen such battles not once or twice, and most of the times, they had witnessed the defeat of southeastern experts. The wolf bites the tiger. Chiyo Shinji suddenly congealed a fierce wolf made up of Zhen Yuan. The wolf roared and rushed towards Xiao Zhen to tear him apart. Xiao Zhen retreated again and was trying to stay away from the wolf while charging up his sword light attack. Ha ha ha, is this a so-called southeastern genius? I see nothing but a loser who is about to die. Qiu Xinzi's supporters started laughing and mocking the experts from the southeast region. Jian Wuqing shook his head and said, Xiao Zhen is indeed a talented guy, but he lacks inheritance. Yi Shiwen nodded. There truly was some disparity between the geniuses of the southeastern region and Ming Empire. Although there was amazing talent in the southeastern region, but the experts lacked inheritance that was actually abundant in a great empire like the Ming Empire. This was the reason why even the strongest experts of the Great Yu state, like Wu Patian, was not even an expert of the Age realm. The old head was one of the few sage experts of the Great Yu state who died in battle, but in the Ming Empire, sage experts were not rare. There were several well-known sage experts in the Ming Empire. This gap was clear at a glance. The gap was even bigger when comparing the number of legendary experts. When the gap was so great while comparing high-level experts, it would naturally be even greater while comparing the younger generation. No wonder young geniuses like Xiao Zhen lacked enough inheritance to compete with the geniuses of Ming Empire. In fact, this was why the young experts of the southeast region knew that this was going to be very dangerous for them. They were aware of the fact that they would have to face many strong opponents in the foreign land, but they still dared to embark on the journey because only with such discipline and dedication, they would succeed in the future. Yi Shiwen was aware of this. After all, he was not born with a silver spoon in his mouth. His father was not a top expert, so getting inheritance was out of the question. The only thing that helped Yi Shiwen come so far was the mysterious space, otherwise, he would be more desperate than others. Boom! Several fierce wolves came out of Qiu Xinzi's blade and surrounded Xiao Zhen from all sides. Xiao Zhen was in a desperate situation right now, but he did not give up. He glared at Qiu Xinzi, then shouted, "One more try. I'll gladly help you die, come." Qiu Xinzi's cold smile indicated his killing intention as he commanded the fierce wolves to attack Xiao Zhen at once. Boom! 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 Xiao Zhen's sword started to emit violent thunderbolts. A thunderbolt struck one of the fierce wolves and its body exploded, turning into a bundle of energy and scattered in the atmosphere. However, there was a lot of fierce wolves. His thunder attacks were not enough to stop all wolves. The extent of Zhen Yuan used by Qiu Xinzi to congeal these fierce wolves was far beyond the imagination of ordinary people. After Xiao Zhen managed to somehow get rid of all fierce wolves, suddenly, the figure of a person instantly appeared in front and shot a massive daoqi at him. Boom! Xiao Zhen's sword managed to deflect the attack, but the sheer force present in the attack was enough to break his sword, and the impact sent him flying across the sky. Streams of blood oozed out of his wounded body as he fell down from the sky. Xiao Zhen. His friends immediately fly up to catch him in midair, but were startled when they saw layer after layer of daoqi coming towards them. Qiu Xinzi sneered and said, "You think I will allow you to save him?" Puff! 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 Xiao Zhen's friends were blasted away by the barrage of daoqi attacks. "Stop, you are crossing the line now." Lu Yueru flew up and said. Seeing a beauty like her standing in his way, Qiu Xinzi's eye shone up. He smiled and said, "Listen, girl. I am no tyrant, but I just cannot ignore braggarts, I mean you southeastern experts who think so highly of yourselves. However, you girl, are you also going to TMU? I say, drop the plan, you won't last long if you stay with these losers. But you can come with me if you want. I will take good care of you and give you everything you ever desired." "No thanks, I'm not interested." Lu Yueru replied in a cold voice. "You can follow me, these southeastern losers are not worthy of you." Qiu Xinzi laughed and extended his gasified big hand to grasp her. Suddenly, a shrill piercing sound echoed out of the blue. Humph! Jian Wuqian had shot a massive sword key that instantly collided with Qiu Xinzi's big gasified hand. Ah! Qiu Xinzi's big hand was cut down in a blink of an eye. If his hand was not wrapped in Zhen Yuan, it would have been truncated by now. "Who are you?" Qiu Xinji barely managed to speak while bearing the intense pain in his hand and heart. How dare you attack me? I see you are angry. Don't you want to kill me now? Jian Wuchen said calmly but with a strange look on his face. You are also an expert from the southeast region? Qiu Xinji said in a disdainful tone. Shut up. Let your blade do the talk. Jian Wuchen pointed his sword at him and said. Qiu Xinzi's complexion changed because he knew that Jian Wuchen was much stronger than him. Though he wasn't too scared of provoking southeastern powerhouses because there were much stronger powerhouses on his side as well. Chapter 289, Nighttime Assassination Attempt. Qiu Xinzi's complexion suddenly changed when he realized that Jian Wuchen was much stronger than him. He also realized his mistake of having provoked a strong man from the southeast region. Indeed, the top figures of Ming Empire were superior to those of the southeast region, but they were not present here to save him. Jian Wuchen flew up slowly with a calm look on his face. At this time, the southeastern experts also recognized Jian Wuchen and Yi Shiwen. They had seen these two on the Demon Island. Of course, two famous geniuses from their homeland had come to their rescue. They would certainly feel proud. Now they could proudly claim that even their southeast region was home to rampant experts. It's him. Lu Yueru never expected to see Yi Shiwen like this. Although she had managed to sort things out with Yi Shiwen with the invention of Ji Moon, she still never thought that Yi Shiwen and Jian Wuchen would come to her rescue. Xiaozhen's complexion also changed when he was saved by the intervention of Jian Wuchen off Yi Shiwen. There certainly used to be some hatred between him and Yi Shiwen, but that was long lost in the past. If you think you are skilled, why don't you go fight with Shunan Prefecture's strongest pair? Qiu Xinji somewhat sternly said. Sure, I will kill you first then look for that pair you talk about. Jian Wuchen replied in an equally stern voice, without a hint of boasting visible in his presence. These were not his ruthless words, it was just the way his mind worked. He wanted to become a sword master and must beat powerful foes to gain the status of the strongest sword master. Qiu Xinji's face turned pale because he could tell from Jian Wuchen's tightly locked killing intention that he was not lying. Shua! Qiu Xinji immediately attacked. He already wasn't considering himself an opponent of Jian Wuchen, so how could he possibly let his opponent gain the upper hand? Qiu Xinji released Bladiki almost instantly that transformed into several howling wolves and rushed towards Jian Wuchen. Jian Wuchen smiled as if this attack was not even worth his attention. He just waved his sword once and destroyed all wolves at once. His movements and his sword attack appeared slow to the naked eye but were incredibly fast in reality. There was no way those wolves could dodge his attack, let alone approach his body. I never thought that there can be a sword master like him in the southeast region. A young expert couldn't help but admit that Jian Wuchen was indeed very strong, far more powerful than Qiu Xinji. Now you idiots will get to know that summer insects shouldn't talk the language of ice. At this time, one of the remaining teammates of Lu Yueru sneered and said, You called southeastern experts overreaching and thought we cannot have invincible experts? Well, guess what, the truth is that a mere prefecture like yours can never compete with our southeast region. Those young experts in silk clothes couldn't retaliate because they knew that Jian Wuchen was stronger than their Qiu Xinji, who was the strongest in their group. Before they could get a chance to think what to do next, the scene changed dramatically. Jian Wuchen shot a terrifying swordlight that went across the sky and instantly routed Qiu Xinzi's offensive, continuing forward towards him. Puchi! Qiu Xinzi's entire right arm was directly cut down by the sword key and fell from the sky, followed by his loud scream. Jian Wuchen looked coldly at Qiu Xinji then turned away without giving another glance. Such an opponent was basically not worth his time. You will regret it. Qiu Xinji shouted while trying his best to endure the severe pain. Jian Wuchen didn't say anything in reply, just turned around and returned to the side of Yi Shiwen. At this time, those young experts did not dare to wait anymore. They quickly picked up the chopped arm and escaped from there along with Qiu Xinji. They were not stupid and knew full well that now was not the time to take revenge. They must retreat for now and have their family and other formidable people to come forward. They obviously weren't Jian Wuchen's opponents, hence making him mad would not exactly be a good idea. Thanks, you two, for coming to our rescue. Xiaozhen ignored the old hatred for Yi Shiwen in his heart, bit the bullet and showed a fair expression of gratitude. You don't need to thank me, this time I did nothing. Yi Shiwen smiled and said without showing any sign of hostility. This allowed Xiaozhen to feel somewhat relieved, knowing that Yi Shiwen was willing to forget the past. Thanks a lot, both of you. Lu Yueru looked at both Yi Shiwen and Jian Wuchen and said, but it doesn't seem like they will give up. The path to TMU was very dangerous. Many people lost their lives on this path every time before the assessment. I would like to meet that Qiu Xinzi's ominous wolf brothers and play with them. Shu Nan's strongest pair sounds like formidable foes. I just hope they won't disappoint me. Yi Shiwen smiled as he was planning to defeat all his opponents sooner or later. That was what it meant to enter TMU via competition. Well, in that case, we will leave first. Lu Yueru said, although she would also like to stay, but she was not as bold and fearless as Yi Shiwen. What if there was a half-step legendary expert hidden in this city? Lu Yueru and her remaining team members left the scene. Yi Shiwen and Jian Wuchen went back to the inn and started waiting for the ominous wolf duo to come. Their willingness to fight was being fueled by the fact that the ominous wolf duo was at the top of the food chain around here, in the younger generation of Shunan Prefecture. After Jian Wuchen thoroughly defeated Qiu Xinji, the news about this incident sent entire Shunan Prefecture into chaos. For a long time, no powerhouse from the southeast region had been able to disrespect them like this. Many people wanted to teach Jian Wuchen and Yi Shiwen a lesson, but no one dared to get involved. Gradually, the curtain of the night covered the sky. There was an enchantment hidden within Yi Zaiwen's robe that not just prevented the ongoing conversation from being heard by people outside the room but also picked up signs of any trouble on the outside. Our journey is going to be difficult, Yi Shiwen said. These experts of truth 8th 9th stage are nothing, let's pick a fight with half-step legendary experts. That should be fun, the wolf cub said. Just like Great Yu State, the main fighting force of Ming Empire was located in its imperial capital, including Sage Realm experts. Shunan Prefecture was located in the border region and at most could offer half-step legendary experts as obstacles in their path. However, Yi Shiwen was determined to fight with much more powerful opponents in order to gain experience for his next breakthrough. The path you have taken so far has been paved on the bones of the fallen, Yi Mo said with a sigh. However, if that was not the case, then you wouldn't have grown so powerful, and that too so fast. Yi Shiwen didn't get a chance to reply as he was interrupted by an enormous coercion falling down from the sky. This coercion was not directed at others but only on Yi Shiwen and Jian Wuchen. Half-step legendary. The wolf cub immediately sensed the enemy's level. Right then, Jian Wuchen, who was in the next room, also sensed the enemy's presence and immediately shot a rippling sword key into the sky, directly overturning the roof in the process. Yi Shiwen also flew into the sky and saw the figure of a man, clad in a black robe, flying towards Jian Wuchen. There was a dagger in his hand and seemed to be quenched with some kind of poison, which especially made the dagger to reflect dark rays of light under the moonlight. He was extremely fast, with his physique and movements like a ghost in general, as he instantly arrived in front of Jian Wuchen and attacked with his dagger. The horrifying coercion of half-step legendary realm was firmly suppressing Jian Wuchen, almost making it impossible for him to move. Jian Wuchen roared in the sky and suddenly shot an enormous sword intention that immediately shattered the coercion and freed him. I don't care what tricks you are using, my sword is enough to render all of them useless. Jian Wuchen rushed towards the half-step legendary assassin and struck with his sword. The assassin was taken aback and did not dare to face Jian Wuchen head-on. Although he was at half-step legendary realm, he majored in the ways of assassination. This enabled him to assassinate even legendary-level experts by making use of perfectly timed sneak attacks. However, that did not mean that he was very strong or something. His only strong trait was the art of effective sneak attack and instant assassination. In a real fight, he wouldn't stand a chance against even a strong expert of complete truth realm like Jian Wuchen. Failing to assassinate Jian Wuchen in time was his biggest mistake, and now that he wanted to escape, Jian Wuchen wouldn't let that happen. And even more frightening was the fact that he could feel a terrifying aura as if tracing his entire being from the sidelines. Although the owner of this aura didn't go into action right away, they seemed all prepared to attack any time now. It was obvious that the assassin had no way to escape from this situation. Thinking of this, the assassin bit the bullet and clashed with Jian Wuchen. He first needed to deal with the sword master in front of him, only then he might have a chance to run away from the owner of that scary aura. Yi Shiwen sneered and locked onto the assassin in midair using his imposing aura. Since Jian Wuchen had already jumped into the fight, he did not want to intervene. However, he also did not want the assassin to escape, so he used his imposing aura to greatly suppress the assassin's power. A well-planned sneak attack could have killed a legendary expert, but the assassin failed in doing so and also ended up revealing his presence. And the result was that he was on the verge of being killed by an expert of complete truth realm. This was the so-called art of deception, the art of assassination. Chapter 290, Ominous Wolf Attacks. Of course, the probability of being an expert of complete truth realm was very low. After all, the half-step legendary realm was not difficult to attain either. Clang! Jian Wuchen issued a terrifying swordlight that lit up the sky, suddenly alarming the entire city, but the good news was that no one arrived to intervene or to make a fuss or anything. The only one who probably wanted to cry right now was the owner of the inn. The sword light was flying towards the assassin, and since Yi Shiwen was observing this battle from not far away, Jian Wuchen felt somewhat relieved. At this time, Yi Ziwen's presence was quite reassuring, especially because Jian Wuchen was dealing with an expert of half-step legendary realm. Thanks to that, the assassin was literally cornered, and that too to an extent that he suddenly roared and rushed toward Jian Wuchen like a cornered beast that had lost his calm. Despite being an expert of half-step legendary realm, the assassin was scared of Yi Shiwen. And if he didn't even manage to defeat a young sword master of complete truth realm, then he certainly wouldn't stand a chance against Yi Shiwen. Shwa! The assassin's dagger released a poisonous beam that traveled across the sky. It seemed like a desperate attack that was aimed at Jian Wuchen. Jian Wuchen's face was expressionless, though his eyes were as sharp as a sword. The sword danced in his hand and easily deflected the poisonous beam. Immediately, the strong experts of this city began to talk to each other using soul links. They were discussing the fight going on between Jian Wuchen and the assassin. Is this man really from the southeast region? I never expected to see such a great master from the southeast region, to be honest. His opponent is at half-step legendary realm but is just an assassin. I don't think this assassin will last long in a face-to-face battle. We must accept the fact that the southeastern region has talented people. If this guy manages to survive after what has done to Qiu Xinji, in the coming 100 years, he will certainly become a formidable powerhouse. These Soul Link conversations certainly didn't bypass Yi Ziwen's radar. Yi Shiwen sneered and didn't seem particularly pleased from all these experts talking stuff about Jian Wuchen and the southeastern region. It was really laughable how much they had underestimated Jian Wuchen's potential. These people were extremely arrogant and had been like this for a long time. Indeed, the Ming Empire was more powerful than the Great Yu State, but that didn't mean that the entire southeastern region would also lie in the same category. It seemed like the domineering attitude of Qiu Xinji and his friends was a result of the contaminated mindset continuing from previous generations. Boom! 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 The two experts continued to clash again and again in the sky. The assassin was fast like a ghost in general, but Jian Wuchen's speed was quickly growing fast perceptibly. Boom! An enormous burst of energy swept off in all direction, cutting a deep dagger wound in his chest almost instantly. His complexion turned green due to the instant poisoning. The assassin was also in a bad shape. Jian Wuchen's sword had cut open a large hole in his abdomen. Both of them staggered a bit, then immediately rushed towards each other. Jian Wuchen waved his sword and issued a sword intention that suddenly transformed into a massive sword light and went towards his opponent. This attack was lightning fast and arrived right above the assassin's head in a blink of an eye. The spectators held their breaths at this scene. Some of them were in half-step legendary realm and were strong enough to wreak havoc in this city, but even they could feel the insane amount of power contained in Jian Wuchen's attack. They were forced to accept the fact that Jian Wuchen's sword attacks were dangerous and must not be taken lightly. Today, Jian Wuchen used his skills and talent to make several experts envious of him. Boom! The sword light suddenly transformed into a massive double-edged sword, right in front of the assassin. Boom! The assassin's hand transformed into a tiger's mouth and it tried to grab the incoming flying sword. However, the inherent power contained his defense-type attack was not enough to stop Jian Wuchen's offensive. Boom! The assassin was knocked down by the enormous explosion that took place after the collision. His body severely pounded on the ground, making a humanoid-shaped pit in the ground. And at this time, Jian Wuchen arrived right above the assassin and attacked with his sword. Boom! The assassin was directly beheaded by Jian Wuchen. Jian Wuchen had won the fight, but his complexion was deathly pale. His body was drenched with blood, but more importantly, the poison had already spread throughout his body and was affecting his body functions. If he had not been using his own sword ki to defend against the poison, he would be dead by now. Are you all right? It seems you are poisoned. Yi Shiwen asked. I am fine, I can fix this, but I may need to spend some time in closed-door rest. Jian Wuchen said. No problem, if that ominous wolf comes looking for you, I will make him entertain me properly to my heart's content. Yi Shiwen grinned and appeared all ready to fight whenever required. Anyway, the attitude of Qiu Xinji and his clan had already pissed him off. They looked for another inn to rest. Jian Wuchen started to take rest and heal himself. Although he was severely injured in the fight, he told Yi Shiwen that he also gained a lot of benefits. Next day, when Yi Shiwen was busy cultivating and exercising his powers in the mysterious space, suddenly a terrifying aura appeared out of nowhere and pressed down. It seemed as if the aura belonged to a beast, making Yi Shiwen feel like he had stepped into a beast's den. Where are those two troublemakers from the southeast region who have a death wish? Come out. A hoarse voice sounded from the sky. There was a hint of beastly roar in this voice. Yi Shiwen saw the figure of a man standing in the sky. He was clad in military clothing, had rough facial features while his face was covered with hair. He had deep green eyes, and as soon as he howled like a wolf, an endless amount of killing intention spread everywhere. Everyone started fleeing from the streets because they were too scared from his beast's aura. Right now, he appeared just like a werewolf bathing in milky moonlight. Who is this man? You don't know who he is? Well, I cannot expect outsiders to know about our Shunan Prefecture's famous ominous wolf duo. This person and the eldest son of our city lord together make the ominous wolf duo. This person is named Qiu Wolf. He is the most distinguished disciple of Qiu clan. People say that he was once caught by a wolf demon beast in his childhood but was saved later on. He was infected back then and has since inherited the beast's traits of demon wolf race. He is not even 50 years old and has still become one of the two top players in the younger generation of Shunan Prefecture. Well, this is called being fortunate by mistake, but why does he appear so angry? An expert from the southeast region has chopped his younger brother's arm. He has come to take revenge. Everyone was trembling with fear, they could not stand this kind of terrible beastly killing intention. No one could withstand such a killing intention. Boom! An imposing aura exploded from inside the inn and a figure jumped out. Was it you who hurt my younger brother? Qiu Wolf asked and growled at the same time while stubbornly staring at Yi Shiwen like a wolf. No. Yi Shiwen shook his head. If I had fought with him, he would be dead right now. Yi Shiwen answered in an indifferent voice. You are courting death. Qiu Wolf said in a furious tone. Who do you think you are? Yi Shiwen sneered. Oh right, how can I forget, you are one of the Shunan Prefecture's idiotic duo. Yi Shiwen laughed loudly and said. Chiu Wolf's complexion changed immediately. After all, since the day he obtained this title, nobody had dared to make fun of him. I will tear you apart with my own hands, just you watch. Chiu Wolf's imposing aura scattered in all directions and tightly locked onto Yi Shiwen. Tear me apart, you say? I would like you to try. Yi Shiwen stopped laughing and a cold look flashed in his eyes. His body was instantly enveloped in golden divine clothing and a violent godly aura spread in all directions. It seemed as if the true god of the 10,000 worlds had suddenly appeared and all must grovel in front of him. Chapter 291, Showdown with the Ominous Wolf. Two sets of terrifying breaths severely crashed into each other high in the sky. My claws will tear you apart. Chiu Wolf laughed and his wild imposing aura swept out. It seemed as if he was simply looking down on Yi Shiwen. One must know that Chiu Wolf was one of the most competent candidates that were going to participate in TMU assessment. He wouldn't have bothered to come and challenge Yi Shiwen and Jian Wuchen if his younger brother was not involved in this mess. He was a peerless genius of this area and had already stepped into half-step legendary realm a long time ago. His tyrannical strength was unmatched in the younger generation of Shunan Prefecture, so how could he ever consider a southeastern young expert like Yi Shiwen his opponent? Yi Shiwen was closely keeping an eye on this half-step legendary expert who was no less than a beast, a very terrifying being with tyrannical presence. Some of the onlookers were frightened, including several experts of complete truth realm, and there were few half-step legendary experts in the crowd as well, but even they were in a similar state of shock. After all, even they couldn't be compared with Chiu Wolf, who was able to achieve half-step legendary realm in a matter of few decades, establishing himself as a peerless genius of Shunan Prefecture. They were even more shocked to see that Yi Shiwen was practically unaffected by the strong waves of Chiu Wolf's imposing aura when they themselves were affected to the extent of backing off. Die! Chiu Wolf bellowed and sent clouds surging across the sky. Chiu Wolf's roar was accompanied by a terrifying burst of bladiki that transformed into a giant blue wolf and raided all the way down from the sky, opening its mouth to swallow Yi Shiwen. Yi Shiwen stamped his foot on the ground once and a large section of the city collapsed instantly by the explosion of divinities. His golden divine clothes were dancing in the wind, giving the illusion of a mighty god in human form. Bang! The blue wolf and the golden divinities collided in midair and led to a massive explosion, sweeping an endless amount of energy and shock waves in all directions. The blue wolf opened its big mouth wide and roared again and again but was unable to approach Yi Shiwen. However, just then, Yi Shiwen rushed forward and used his golden tyrant hands to grab its upper and lower fangs. Yi Shiwen could smell a fishy smell coming out of its mouth, although it was just condensed out of Lingqi but was abnormally realistic. Yi Shiwen immediately understood that this blue wolf was actually an ancient secret heritage obtained from some high-level demon wolf beast, and perhaps this was the reason why it contained a share of its original powers. Boom! Golden divinities exploded out of Yi Shiwen's body and soared straight into the sky along with a loud explosion. The true mythical power of gilded tyrant form revealed itself properly and the blue wolf was directly torn into two halves by Yi Shiwen. The recurring explosions set off endless shock waves in all directions, reaching all the way to the crowd watching from afar. I never thought that you can actually have so much strength. Chiu Wolf looked at Yi Shiwen with a color of surprise in his eyes. In fact, he never expected for his offensive to be completely wiped out by Yi Shiwen, and that too with just his bare hands. The golden divinities were crawling on Yi Shiwen's body while his killing intention was increasing significantly. There wasn't the slightest trace fear in his heart. But today you shall die. Chiu Wolf said coldly, well, at least you have made me excited for this battle. Chiu Wolf's facial expression revealed a bit of excitement along with anticipation, however, there was an ever-present cold and cruel look in his dark green beastly eyes. Boom! Chiu Wolf struck with his blade horizontally and wildly rushed towards Yi Shiwen. The impact of this attack was so terrific that with each of his steps, the entire world seemed to be trembling as if a god had set out to destroy the world. Come! Yi Shiwen roared, then took out his long blade and released a horrifying blade light, powerful enough to shatter the space in its way. This appeared like a battle between two accomplished experts of half-step legendary realm. Numerous experts were stunned after witnessing the current scene, especially those chief experts who were rooting for Chill Wolf. They were kind of frightened and dumbstruck at the same time while witnessing the true potential and power of the two leading characters from the younger generation. They were used to witnessing battles like this every time TMU opened its gates to take in new disciples, but had never seen such a magnificent battle between two peerless geniuses, each exceeding the barriers of the level they were in. Especially Yi Shiwen, who was just an expert of Truth Realm but was still able to fight on equal grounds with Chill Wolf. In fact, Jian Wuchen would also be considered an evildoer like Yi Shiwen since he defeated a half-step legendary assassin a day ago. However, Jian Wuchen's achievement wasn't as astonishing as Yi Zaiwen's since that half-step legendary assassin was not as strong as Chill Wolf. Boom! The two experts continued to clash again and again at a very high altitude, blasting away clouds everywhere in the sky while the whole city was being showered in colorful flashes of lights time and time again. Jian Wuchen was aware of Yi Zaiwen's ongoing battle but chose to have faith in him and continued to stay indoors. The small cub was also not interested in watching this battle and went for closed-door practice as well. Boom! 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 Both of them were using blades and constantly brandishing blade attacks as if to test who was a better blade master. Chill Wolf's style of using blade was similar to that of the famous Wolf King, who was also the king of 100 beasts from ancient times. However, Yi Zaiwen's blade skills were more conventional and true to the world laws of the blade, and in coordination with gilded tyrant form, the overall might of his blade attacks was incomparably tyrannical. From the beginning, the two men were not using sophisticated blade skills to compete, instead they were relying more on the amount of energy contained in their bladeki attacks. The sheer amount of energy contained in these blade attacks was insane. There was just no way to block or resist any of these blade attacks. In a while, these blade attacks started to show results and Chill Wolf's body was covered in wounds and blood all over. Although Yi Zaiwen's body was covered in blood, there were no signs of wounds anywhere on his body thanks to the instant regeneration provided by Phoenix Regeneration. Yi Shiwen had the advantage of a good combination of Phoenix Regeneration and Gilded Tyrant form. But Chill Wolf's body also had an extremely tyrannical constitution, like that of an ancient wolf demon in general. No one knew what kind of inheritance he had obtained, but his body was insanely tough. Chill Wolf was also capable of healing but a lot slower than Yi Zaiwen's Phoenix Regeneration. Chill Wolf had simply gone berserk right now, his eyes had become red from dark green. It seemed like he had lost his mind due to anger and was blindly attacking Yi Shiwen without waiting for his wounds to heal first. The two experts were going all out and showing no restraints whatsoever. Suddenly, they started to test the level of each other's blade skills and proceeded to use ideal conditions. Yi Shiwen immediately summoned the ideal condition of his blade technique in the form of a huge moon diagram that appeared in the sky and dropped towards Chill Wolf. The moon diagram that appeared this time was not the same as earlier. This time, it contained a strong cold and ominous feeling in the form of dazzling white color on one half of the moon while an endless dark and gloomy color on the other. The spectators were simply unable to look straight ahead, perplexed by the strange and conflicting nature of this moon diagram. This was the result of the integration of sword intention into the ideal condition, otherwise, it would be impossible for the cold moon beheader to possess such an overbearing presence. This new version of cold moon beheader was specially developed by Yi Shiwen to deal with high-level experts. And Yi Zaiwen's ideal condition had outdone Chill Wolf's ideal condition, which was in the form of a diagram showing a pack of wolves running in a vast wilderness. The two diagrams collided in the sky and mutually devoured each other, while at the same time, the two experts mercilessly clashed with each other. The spectators were frightened by this scene that literally shook the entire city. Most experts had comprehended the ideal condition of a martial technique at some point of time in their lives, but they had never seen something like the moon diagram congealed by Yi Shiwen. It was simply on a whole another level, simply out of their reach. In fact, they would never get to know that Yi Shiwen was able to comprehend this ideal condition when he used to be in Hotian realm. Yes, this was the difference between them and Yishuan. There were many experts who simply weren't able to comprehend an ideal condition and used brute force to compensate for the lack of skill. Not to mention, the difficulty of comprehension was more for high-level martial techniques. It was even more difficult to create a new version of ideal condition. Yishuan was able to do it because he had the support of the mysterious space. The scene had been reversed at this time. This time, Yishuan bellowed and released a rippling bladiki that transformed into a coiling dragon midway and flew towards Cho Wolf. Chapter 292, Ominous Wolf killed the coiling dragon. Condensed from bladiki dived down and overran the enemy. Boom! Cho Wolf had no time to dodge and the bladiki cut open a large wound on his chest. A wound so hideous and terrible that it seemed like his chest had sunken terribly into a deep concave, his ribs bent inwards and pieced his internal organs. The wound looked so terrifying that an ordinary person wouldn't bear to look at it. However, the enemy's blade attack had also cut open a wound on Yizaiwen's waist. It looked like a serious wound from which blood was spattering in all directions. Is it over? Damn, don't tell me the strongest genius of our Shunan prefecture has fallen already? Many powerhouses who were observing this battle sighed woefully. Although they not necessarily liked Cho Wolf, but seeing their own being thoroughly suppressed by an outsider was something they were not ready to accept. Is that guy from Southeast region really that strong? In contrast to the pale complexion on Cho Wolf's face, Yizaiwen's facial expression was simply unchanged even though both of them were severely injured. Of course, Yishuan wasn't much affected by such injuries since the Phoenix regeneration technique was constantly working and healing his injuries non-stop. Shwa! Shwa! Roar! Roar! After being seriously injured, Cho Wolf started growling loudly and his body started to transform. His whole body was slowly covered with green hair and his hands turned into sharp claws. The people from Yizaiwen's past world would call Cho Wolf him a werewolf after this transformation. The wound in his chest began to heal at a speed visible to the naked eye. What is going on? The spectators were shocked by this scene as they had never seen Cho Wolf transforming like this before. Perhaps Cho Wolf never got to face a formidable opponent like Yishuan who literally pushed him to the point of resorting to using this transformation to fight back. Yishuan appeared dignified and was not all affected even when Cho Wolf's aura was changing little by little, turning more imposing and terrifying. I think this guy has probably fused the blood of a demon god with his own blood. Yemo said, I guess this is enough to call him a relative of our wolf cub in a way. Yishuan smiled, perhaps there really was such a possibility that the ancestors of the wolf cub and Cho Wolf were related. However, Yishuan did not wait to think about all this stuff as he heard a loud roar and saw the monstrous figure of a ferocious green beast standing in front of him. Boom! Cho Wolf simply abandoned using blade attacks and directly punched towards Yishuan. The power contained in his punch was so enormous that it punched through space, creating a large void in the sky. Yishuan sneered and issued an equally enormous blade attack along with coiling dragon palm that summoned a gigantic black dragon from the depths of abyss. It roared loudly and immediately wrapped Yishuan to form a solid defense, strong enough to block enemies' punch. Bang! The two attacks collided and the resulting explosion set off layer after layer of energy waves in all directions. The good thing was that the battle was going at a very high altitude, otherwise, this explosion toward the beat go, so that both sides are in high altitude, otherwise, the explosion would have destroyed the entire city in one fell swoop. I will eat you. Cho Wolf said in a beastly voice while salivating heavily through the corners of his mouth, your blood has the kind of flavor I like. I will eat you whole and my cultivation will increase by 1 level, ha 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 ha. After Cho Wolf turned into a werewolf, his humanity had been overtaken by the demon nature of the wolf god. Now he could instinctively sense the divinities contained within Yizaiwen's body and wanted to seize them for nourishment. Boom! Cho Wolf suddenly took a step forward and disappeared, instantly trampled through the void in the form of a green torrent rushing towards Yishuan. You want to eat me? Get lost! Yi Zaiwen's eyes flashed with killing intention as he suddenly kicked the green torrent as soon as it approached him. Boom! The mighty torrent of greenish energy was instantly dissipated by Yi Zaiwen's kick, exposing the huge figure of Qiu Wolf. Qiu Wolf never expected to actually see his attack being kicked away by Yi Shiwen. After transforming into a werewolf, not even an expert of the legendary first stage could rival his horrifying strength, let alone an expert of complete truth realm like Yi Shiwen. Directly coming in contact with such terrific power was equivalent to seeking death. But Yi Shiwen actually kicked his energy-based torrent attack as if it was nothing. Of course, how could he ever know about Yi Zaiwen's tyrant body technique that enabled him to come in contact with gods and devil and even tear them to shreds with his bare hands if needed? Not to mention, now he had practiced an enhanced version of the same technique, the gilded tyrant form that allowed him to contend with all sorts of terrifying forces. Even if Yi Shiwen was now at complete truth realm, his strength was more than enough to deal with the likes of Qiu Wolf in werewolf form. Ha! Yi Shiwen shouted loudly and his right foot was suddenly enveloped by an extremely potent golden energy. Then he launched a kick at Qiu Wolf and sent him flying across the sky. Yi Shiwen immediately chased down at an incredibly fast speed and simultaneously summoned Hans Seal in the sky that directly smashed down towards Qiu Wolf while he was still in midair. Howl! Qiu Wolf howled and immediately released the massive shadow of a blue wolf that was made up of pure energy. It immediately opened its huge mouth as if to devour the Hans Seal in one go. Boom! The blue wolf directly collided with Hans Seal and vaporized instantly, however, Qiu Wolf seized this chance to escape. The blue wolf's body had turned into blood fog that was automatically absorbed by Yi Zaiwen's gilded tyrant form and added to his divinities collection. The traces of divinities present in the blue wolf's dissipated body truly indicated that Qiu Wolf had obtained the heritage of an ancient demon god and hence contained pure divinities in his blood. It was not strange for people to have various types of strange heritage, and even Yi Shiwen had a fair share of his own heritages, including Coiling Dragon Palm, Hans Seal, Phoenix Regeneration and the Mysterious Space. However, Yi Shiwen was not willing to show mercy to Qiu Wolf no matter what. A coiling dragon suddenly appeared in the sky and roared towards Qiu Wolf. By now, everyone had come to accept that Yi Shiwen was much more powerful than Qiu Wolf. In fact, this battle had been like a game for Yi Shiwen since the beginning. But now, he was being serious in taking down Qiu Wolf and the result was such magnificent display of power. Boom! 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 The entire sky above Shunan City was filled with terrifying explosions as the two experts went all out. The battle had entered a superheated phase, but it was not hard to figure out that Yi Shiwen was completely prevailing. The spectators never expected in the beginning of the fight that Qiu Wolf would completely fall under the wind like this, and that too after transforming into a werewolf. None had ever seen Qiu Wolf completely fall under the wind. The initial ferociousness and beastly dominance of Qiu Wolf was no longer to be seen anywhere. His beastly instincts were telling him to run away from Yi Shiwen. And at this time, the combined attacks of Coiling Dragon and Hans Seal had simply suppressed him thoroughly to the extent of rendering him unable to fight back. Ah! Qiu Wolf howled when he was unable to bear the intense attacks even if he was in a werewolf form. His wounds were getting more and more severely and no longer healing quickly. However, Yi Shiwen was showing no signs of weakening. This was the most frightening thing about facing an opponent like Yi Shiwen, who didn't show signs of wearing down even after prolonged battles. Yi Zaiwen's true power had gone far beyond his imagination, to the point of making him feel inferior. He could not go on fighting with Yi Shiwen since his own injuries were getting worse while there was no visible damage done to the enemy. Qiu Wolf continued to roar again and again while his body hair grew longer. He almost transformed into a blue wolf himself and pounced towards Yi Shiwen. Boom! Yi Shiwen shot a palm and released a coiling dragon towards him. Bang! Qiu Wolf's beastly body was instantly sent flying after a fierce collision with the coiling dragon. Yi Shiwen didn't waste time and immediately summoned Hans Seal in the sky that transformed into a huge mountain and descended towards Qiu Wolf, who was still in midair. Stop! At this time, A loud voice transmitted from the city and a big hand as if torn open the space itself and went towards Hans Seal to stop it in its path. Yi Shiwen sneered, and without showing any mercy, he increased the falling speed of Hans Seal and smashed it down upon Chiu Wolf. Boom! As soon as Chiu Wolf's body came in contact with Hans Seal, it transformed into a vague mass of blood fog, and the divinities contained in that mass of blood fog was instantly absorbed into Yi Ziwen's body. Comment from author: some people are raising doubts about half-step legendary realm, so let me explain again in detail. Half-step legendary realm is just a standard to measure whether someone is a genius or not. It is a lot harder to have a breakthrough inside half-step legendary realm than in legendary realm. Most people find it easy to directly step into legendary realm from half-step legendary realm. Only true geniuses are able to control their cultivation to the extent that they are able to have breakthroughs within half-step legendary realm without entering the legendary realm. Only a true genius can stop himself from stepping into the legendary realm and accumulate within half-step legendary realm. Also, each stage within half-step legendary realm is much harder to get to and also grants much larger power in comparison to the corresponding stage on the legendary realm. For example, if a person is at half-step legendary 4th stage and he decided to have a breakthrough into the legendary realm, then he would directly reach the legendary 4th stage or even above that depending upon the depth of his accumulation. Similarly, if a person is at half-step legendary 9th stage and decided to have a breakthrough into the legendary realm, he cannot. Because he would directly step into Sage realm. All experts try their best to stay at half-step legendary realm and accumulate because this is the fastest way to reach Sage realm. Those who fail to do so ultimately give up and step into the legendary 1st stage, however, they reach a bottleneck after reaching legendary 4th or 5th stage and are stuck there forever. That is why only true geniuses can step into Sage realm, and they choose the best method of doing so by staying at half-step legendary realm and accumulating. By doing so, they can entirely skip the legendary realm and directly step into Sage realm. Some people choose to stop accumulating at half-step legendary 5th stage and go for a breakthrough into the legendary 6th stage, then continue forward. Some people choose to accumulate all the way to half-step legendary 9th stage and before directly breaking into Sage realm. Half-step legendary realm may appear as a redundant realm, but it is actually an important filter to separate true geniuses from ordinary ones. I know that many readers were unable to understand the concept because they skipped the paragraphs where it was explained in detail. This concept is not very complicated, just needs a bit of patience from the reader's side. I will try to simplify these concepts as much as possible in future chapters. Chapter 293, Escapes into the Heavenly Calamity. Yi Ziwen's body completely absorbed the divinities, which almost immediately transformed into a roaring spirit wolf inside Yi Ziwen's world of consciousness and attacked his soul, as if to swallow his soul entirely and turn him into a host. This world of consciousness within Yi Shiwen was like a sea of consciousness, entirely composed of golden divinities. The spirit wolf wanted to stir up trouble and gain control over this sea of consciousness, but was immediately absorbed into the sea instead. Once the absorption was over, Yi Shiwen felt a huge progress in his gilded tyrant form, since the density and toughness of his golden body was directly proportional to the amount of divinities present in the sea of consciousness. On the outside, Yi Shiwen immediately reacted by running away from there when a large hand suddenly clutched over and literally crushed the surrounding space in its path. It did not stop and instantly went towards Yi Shiwen to crush him to death. This expert's heightened anger was evident from his actions. Yi Shiwen was being chased by a legendary expert, so he did not dare to rush in the direction of the inn where the wolf cub and Jian Wuchen were undergoing closed-door training. Instead, he fled in the opposite direction, trying his best to lead his pursuer out of the city. One must remember that Yi Shiwen had been able to kill legendary-level devils during the Devil Siege on Yi Yuan School, because of the suppression effect of Tianyuan Mirror on devils. The same strategy was not going to work on a human expert of legendary realm. Yi Shiwen was certainly aware of the terrifying powers of a true legendary expert. He was also aware of the difference between half-step legendary realm and legendary realm, which was only for determining the difference between true geniuses and non-geniuses. Only true geniuses were able to stay in half-step legendary realm for accumulation. Much more powerful geniuses also enjoyed stronger and profound accumulation. They could even skip legendary realm altogether and directly step into sage realm with a single breakthrough. First you kill our Chill Wolf and then you plan to just walk away. A hoarse voice said in a furious tone, and a sizzling energy burst out of that big hand. The entire space, in an instant, was blockaded, and it seemed as if a huge heavenly cage suddenly fell upon Yi Shiwen and entrapped him, making it difficult for him to escape. Today, I must make you pay the price with your blood. An old man's figure appeared in the distance, literally out of nowhere. Yi Shiwen suddenly roared, and his body was enveloped within a thick layer of golden energy that suddenly exploded and destroyed the blockaded space. The very next instant, a pair of golden devil wings flapped behind his back and launched him forward at an incredibly fast speed. The old expert was taken aback when Yi Shiwen destroyed his cage and flew several miles away from him in a blink of an eye. He, then, immediately pulled out a series of attacks that directly bent the space at multiple spots in the sky, acting as a slingshot to send his emancipated body darting forward towards Yi Shiwen at a much faster speed. This legendary expert had already understood the world laws of space and could bend and manipulate space easily to gain incredible speed or create space cages. It was simply impossible for Yi Shiwen to beat a seasoned expert of legendary realm. If not for Yi Zaiwen's miraculous devil wings, his speed wouldn't even be comparable to that of a legendary expert, especially with space manipulation powers. Humph! The old man snorted and shot a divine beam at Yi Shiwen. Boom! The divine beam arrived right in front of Yi Shiwen in a blink of an eye and crashed into his body. He spat a mouthful of blood, staggered a bit and almost dropped down from the sky. This gave the old man enough time to shorten the distance between them. You can't deal with this old monster. He is out of your league. Yi Mo appeared on Yi Shiwen's shoulder and said, Ming Empire is truly prosperous, as they say. Even a small prefecture like Shunan is home to a legendary expert. Forget all that for now. We need to get rid of him as soon as possible. Yi Shiwen wiped the blood from the corners of his mouth. This legendary expert was too terrifying, powerful enough to cripple him with one move. If an ordinary expert of complete truth realm was there in his shoes just now, they would be dead by now. In fact, even an expert of half-step legendary realm didn't stand a chance against this old man. Yi Zaiwen's tyrant body technique was really tyrannical, enough to save his life from the last attack. Phoenix regeneration was constantly working to regenerate his wounds, and that too within few breaths worth of time. This guy knows space laws and 2 levels above you. Escape is our only option. Yi Mo said. Yi Shiwen was extremely fast, covering hundreds of miles in a blink of an eye, but the old man was chasing him down unceasingly, showing no signs of let him off. This old expert's anger was real deal. After all, Shunan Prefecture lost their strongest nurtured genius who was going to represent them in TMU assessment. Although Shunan Prefecture was considered quite influential, its importance was considered nothing much in rest of the Ming Empire. And after putting so much effort and resources in cultivation a true genius like Chill Wolf, he was killed by an outsider so effortlessly. Only Yi Zaiwen's death could bring peace to his raging heart. Not only you are going die, your family, and anyone remotely related to you will be killed. I will go find your relatives and friends in the southeast region and kill them one by one in the most brutal ways possible. And remember, you are the reason behind their imminent sufferings. The old man gritted his teeth and threatened Yi Shiwen. Fuck you, old bastard. Yi Shiwen got immensely angry at this moment. He could not stand someone threatening the safety and security of his family and friends. The old man's facial expression looked even grimmer as he once again shot a divine beam towards Yi Shiwen, but this time, Yi Shiwen quickly turned around and shot his palm to block the attack. The tyrannical power present in this attack shook his entire being, almost to the extent of breaking his bones. Any ordinary expert would have long been dead, but Yi Shiwen still continued to fly forward tenaciously. Yi Shiwen did not know for how long he continued to fly, but he seemed to have come out of Shunan border. There were traces of wounds still visible on his body since the severity of his injuries had now exceeded the instant healing capacity of Phoenix generation. Now, it took longer time for the wounds to heal. The old man was still in hot pursuit. At this time, Yishuan saw a massive lightning flash in a large group of clouds floating not far from him. Is someone challenging the heavenly calamity? No, it is not a person, but a demon beast. Yi-Mo suddenly shouted. Yishuan suddenly hesitated. One must know that whether human experts of demon beasts, all must face the threat of challenging the heavenly calamity to step into the legendary realm. The legendary realm was said to induce the beginning of the transcendental change from the time someone challenged the heavenly calamity while having a breakthrough from half-step legendary realm to legendary realm, or from legendary realm to sage realm. In fact, even stage-wise breakthroughs within the legendary realm needed to challenge the heavenly calamity. The so-called heavenly calamity's very function was to stop mortal beings from surpassing the very laws of heaven and earth. After all, sickness and death were also part of world laws, and the emergence of a legendary warrior would certainly violate this rule by increasing the lifespan to 1,000 years. Heavenly calamity was a challenge put evenly in front of demon beasts and human being while having a breakthrough to the legendary realm. The same law of challenge and punishment applied to not just to demon beasts and human beings but also to other species. The breakthroughs within half-step legendary realm from one stage to another required a small heavenly calamity in comparison. But each breakthrough within legendary realm required larger heavenly calamity. It was said that only the person having a breakthrough must alone face the heavenly calamity. Any help or tricks would cause the heavenly calamity to go berserk. But right now, Yishuan only had the choice to use this heavenly calamity as a shield to save himself from the old man. Boom! Yizaiwan's sudden intrusion aroused endless thunderbolts to go berserk. It seemed as if the heavenly calamity had been provoked and an inexhaustible of thunderbolts was dropping down to attack Yishuan. Damn! The old man stopped next to the heavenly calamity with clear signs of fear on his face. He still remembered his own deadly encounter with a similar heavenly calamity while having a breakthrough from the half-step legendary realm to the legendary realm. This was the main reason why there were so many half-step legendary experts but only a handful of legendary experts. The simply different between them was the confidence and bravery to challenge the heavenly calamity. Most half-step legendary experts preferred playing it safe and hence chose to stay in half-step legendary realm until they were confident enough to challenge the heavens. Watching how Yishuan had been completely submerged in thunder calamity, the old man's facial expression revealed a pleasant look along with slight traces of regret for not killing him personally. Chapter 294, Heavenly Calamity quenches the body. Anyone that messed with the heavenly calamity was bound to face its wrath. Even if a sage expert was to enter the domain of heavenly calamity, it would immediately calibrate itself to the degree of sage realm. So in the end, it was not possible for an outsider to interfere with someone's breakthrough. It was in a way mandatory for an expert to go through the heavenly tribulation on their own in order to level up. Hence, the old man naturally did not dare to approach the ongoing heavenly calamity. He speculated that it was probably a demon beast having a breakthrough from half-step to legendary realm. He stayed there and continued to observe for a long time, only to find out that the range of this heavenly calamity was getting bigger and bigger and was now about to approach him. He made a decision to get out of there. He didn't want to mess with heavenly calamity and end his life in the process. In his view, Yishuan was certainly dead already since the heavenly calamity was calibrated accordingly for a breakthrough into the legendary realm, whereas Yishuan was only at complete truth realm. In other words, the heavenly calamity didn't need to recalibrate itself to kill Yishuan since he was at a lower level. Not to mention, the old man knew about incidents where higher-level experts had died while trying to help their juniors by entering the domain of heavenly calamity. Coming out alive from the domain of heavenly calamity was something unheard of. At this time, Yishuan had no time to pay attention to the old man because he had already guessed what the old man was thinking right now. Not to mention, he really needed to focus on the tragedy he was facing right now. But the old man's calculation lacked a very important element. He thought that Yi Shiwen was at complete truth realm and must have used some tricks to defeat Chiu Wolf. It was obviously impossible for an expert of complete truth realm to survive the dreadful impact of heavenly calamity. He didn't know about Yi Ziwen's actual strength and the content of energy within his tyrannical gilded body. The old man was too satisfied with the present situation and seemed to have overlooked a very important point. Why would Yi Shiwen knowingly take such a suicidal step and jump into the domain of heavenly calamity? Yi Shiwen's tyrannical and divine gilded body had saved his life. An ordinary expert would be dead by now. However, several bruises and lacerated wounds could be seen all over his golden body, clearly showing the terrifying and destructive power of heavenly calamity. Shwa shwa. Several hundred electric snakes swooped down from the dark clouds and attacked Yi Ziwen's body. Yi Shiwen was completely motionless, but his gilded tyrant form was continuously enhancing at a very fast pace. His whole body was surrounded by golden rays of light rising from all directions, which then transformed into golden swords and hacked the electric snakes. Bang! 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 Intermittent fierce explosions occurred all around him that gave rise to a violent storm. The electric snakes were swept away in all directions and wreaked havoc everywhere. Yi Shiwen. I know a devil technique that will allow your gilded tyrant form to completely absorb all this rogue energy of the heavenly calamity for working out your body. Yi Mo's excited voice sounded in Yi Ziwen's mind. Yi Shiwen nodded at Yi Mo's advice. After all, he had no other options anyway. As long as he could turn this tragic situation into just another training session, he would be satisfied. He would very much like to absorb all this free energy to make his gilded tyrant body even more tyrannical. Although he wanted to enhance his gilded tyrant body to the next layer, he didn't know how long this heavenly calamity was going to last. Crash bang. All of a sudden, a disastrous lightning crashed down right upon Yi Shiwen. Bang! 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 The massive lightning fragmented into several electric snakes and literally started ravaging his body from all sides. In a flash, there was blue smoke all around his body. This attack was enough to vaporize an expert of complete truth realm. However, Yi Shiwen was unmoved and basically, willingly, allowed these lightning serpents to ravage his body. Tyrant body technique was actively revolving within his body while his golden body was sucking the lightning energy like a sponge, all the while nourishing his flesh. It was a shocking scene since no one had heard of someone actually bathing in a heavenly calamity to nurture their body. A strange golden divine energy was circulating within his body and breaking down the absorbed electric serpents, transforming them into pure energy to act as a tonic for his flesh and bones. His tyrant body technique was also constantly promoting, ascending towards the next layer. It seemed like the non-stop bombardment of electric snakes would make him deaf, but he kept on focusing on operating various martial techniques to keep the strengthening process going. However, the heavenly calamity didn't seem to finish anytime soon. In fact, it continued to get even more intense with passing time. The electric snakes, dropping down from the inked sky, had literally started to rain down upon Yi Shiwen. Even the size and power of each electric snake had increased dramatically, making them appear like thunder dragons coming down to swallow Yi Shiwen. From afar, it appeared like a small figure was sitting cross-legged in midair and thunder dragons were continuously ravaging his body. The entire scene was riddled with lightning flashes and deafening thunderclaps. All one could see was a seemingly insignificant silhouette of Yi Shiwen, submerged in a sea of lightning. Yi Shiwen did not dare to relax even for a second. The tyrant body technique was working non-stop while his entire body was enveloped with some kind of blue smoke emanating from his body that was being constantly ravaged. It seemed like his body was literally on fire and burning intensely. Yi Shiwen was sitting in mid-air in order to avoid conduction of electricity to the ground while his own body was being bruised and lacerated again and again. In fact, his skin had begun to burn at multiple places, giving just a glimpse of the terrific power of heavenly calamity. Yi Ziwen's complexion turned somewhat pale since he was relying on tyrant body technique, practiced to the third layer. It was not sufficient to deal with the present situation, so he was aiming to enhance it to the fourth layer. A few months ago, he had managed to reach the peak of the third layer, and now he was going to take advantage of this opportunity to reach the fourth layer of Tyrant Body Technique. This was the most important task right now, only then he could really come out alive of this deadly domain. The heavenly calamity was further strengthening itself as it did not want let Yishuan go alive. In fact, Yishuan had to rely on phoenix regeneration to stop his body from disintegrating, but even that was failing to fully repair his injuries in time. Now, it seemed like his whole body was on superheated fire, trapped in a cycle of continuously disintegrating and restoring. At times, his body would go almost devoid of blood due to rapid vaporization, only surviving thanks to his rapid regeneration ability. He estimated that soon his bones would start to crumble. Yishuan clenched his teeth as soon as he realized that he was on verge of reaching the fourth layer of Tyrant Body Technique. He did know for how long he stayed inside the domain of heavenly calamity, but it was finally showing signs of disappearing. Immediately, numerous electric serpents sprouted once more from the clouds, and the very next moment, the billowing black clouds disappeared without a trace. These electric serpents merged together and transformed into a gigantic thunder dragon, roaring in the sky before suddenly rushing towards Yishuan. Absorb this thunder dragon, then you can successfully reach the fourth layer of Tyrant Body Technique in one fell swoop. Emo said while looking at the magnificent figure of Thunder Dragon. Yishuan knew that this Thunder Dragon was far stronger than all those electric serpents. Boom! The Thunder Dragon opened its gigantic mouth as if to devour Yishuan, and a violent explosion occurred. A burst of lightning storm instantly collided with his body. Yishuan felt as if his body would collapse in this terrible storm, ultimately turning into a pile of dust. All the while, Tyrant Body Technique was working crazily and absorbing a massive amount of energy. Not to mention, the Phoenix regeneration was also working at its max and reconstructing his body rapidly. Boom! Under this impact of a seemingly infinite amount of frantic energy, Yishuan suddenly bulldozed through the barrier of the third layer and reached the fourth layer. It was like the collapse of a dam, allowing the flow of accumulated energy throughout his body. Tyrant Body Technique Fourth Layer. After reaching the fourth layer of Tyrant Body Technique, now he could simply disregard all attacks from the experts of half-step Legendary Realm or Legendary First Stage. In fact, even if he was to bump into a much higher level expert, he should still be able to make a great escape, and his enemies would find it difficult to injure him. Yishuan noticed that the heavenly calamity had disappeared from the sky without a trace, and then suddenly, he saw the figure of a demon beast standing on the ground. It was a Fire Lin beast. Yishuan recalled that he had seen a Fire Lin beast before, and this one looked similar to the previous one as well. But the difference was that this one was much larger and stronger than the previous one, simply a monster. However, he also noticed that there were several bruises and cut wounds all over its body. Its skin was burnt at multiple places along with some open flesh wounds, from where its blood was streaming down and staining the soil. Facing a heavenly tribulation was equally dangerous for demon beasts like it was for human experts. Even if this Fire Lin beast had the blood of unicorn in its veins, dealing with heavenly tribulation was still a risky task. Not to mention, it had to deal with a raging heavenly calamity due to Yizaiwan's intrusion. In fact, it almost came close to burning to crisp. Its red eyes were staring at Yishuan. Its imposing aura was kind of unstable initially but suddenly started to increase drastically, soon approaching the horrifying aura of the Legendary Realm before firmly locking onto Yishuan. It was waiting for its strength to recover first before going after Yishuan to kill him. Yishuan suddenly sensed the imminent danger in his heart. Yishuan, hurry up and kill that beast, don't let it recover. You have barely managed to escape unharmed from the heavenly calamity, but it is in its weakest state. Kill it and absorb its demon core, and that should help you in stepping into the half-step Legendary Realm. Emo said. You're tuning in to the Blissful Bookshelf YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.